Both of you are acting like schoolyard children here. Like, grow up and act like the grown men you are. I'm a Christian scholar specializing in theology, and today I want to look at a recent debate between Godlogic and Abu Noori, and the debate was, is there more than one God in the Bible? I want to look at this debate, look at their arguments, and show where both of them make mistakes. I think that both of these guys did really poorly. They had a poor showing. They didn't do well. But despite the fact that they both did poorly, I am inclined to say that Abu Noori probably won on this case. I think Godlogic probably lost, and I know that that's going to be just cause certain people's like vessels in their forehead to just explode, and for them just to have like conniptions and whatnot. I'm saying that as someone who is myself a Christian. I made an entire book arguing for the deity of Christ. I want people to become Christian. I would like for people to leave Islam, whatnot. But if I'm looking at this debate and I'm being honest, Godlogic did not do well, and so I want to look at this objectively, and through this, hopefully raise the standard of dialogue that we have on the internet about these topics and keep everybody honest. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and hop right into it. So through the magic of television, I'm going to pull myself up to the top left screen, and then we're going to jump in with Abu Noori's opening remarks.
All right, man. I'm gonna go ahead and put my belt down for a second. We'll be bringing it back out shortly. Sorry, hi everybody. I'm Abu Noori. You can check me out on TikTok at Abu Noori1 or here on YouTube. So today we're talking about the multiple gods that are present in the Bible. And when I say multiple gods, I'm not talking about judges. I'm not talking about kings, rulers. I'm talking about gods flying, floating around, throwing thunderbolts. We're talking about gods. Everybody who's a Christian or believes in the Bible should know about this reality in your Bible. To start off, I want to start off with Genesis chapter 9, verse 24 and 25. And it reads, When Noah awoke from his wine and found what his youngest son had did to him, he said, Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. Now, when we read the Bible, when we see that it says cursed and slaves, what we did not expect from this statement was that by slave or enslavement, what was meant was the culture, the religion, the identity, and the way of life of these people. And this will be relevant later. So let's start off and begin with, what is a god? I'm going to quote you from the Cambridge Dictionary. So Cambridge Dictionary, definition 1, what is a god? A spirit or being believed to control some part of the universe or life, or often worship for doing so, or something that represents this spirit or being. Example, gods or goddesses, the ancient Greek gods and goddesses. The god of, their dog was named Thor, after the Norse god of thunder. So a god is this type of being, a spirit or a
Okay, so I want to pause here. This is good. So something that kind of frustrates me or gets to me in some of these conversations is people don't define what a god is, and the debate topic here is there more than one god? So we're gonna have to find this thing a god, and we're gonna count how many of these there are, right? And I think Abu Noori is starting this off well by defining what a god is. He's setting a set of criteria, or kind of a prototypical picture of what a god is, and so then if he can find multiple beings in the Old Testament that fit this picture, then he can say there's more than one God. And I want to point out here that the definition he's offered is a pretty plausible, pretty reasonable definition. It's not idiosyncratic. It is a use of this term that fits how we usually use this. So in Greek mythology, we talk about Aphrodite and Zeus and Hades and stuff like that. They were referred to as gods. In Norse mythology, you have similar things. You have Egyptian gods, and in these systems, the beings called gods, they do not possess all of the attributes that we attribute to Yahweh. These beings are not seen as being omnipotent. They're not seen as being, without beginning or without end, stuff like that. And this is similar to how a god is conceptualized in the ancient Near East. In the ancient Near East, you have gods who, they're these powerful figures, often immortal in some sense. They reside in like the spiritual realm. They are bright and shiny, and they have all this like splendor. and they have some type of authority, and oftentimes they are worshipped. Although I would say that in the ancient world, at least in the ancient Near East, a being didn't have to be worshipped. They often were worshipped, but they didn't have to be worshipped to be considered a god. So this is a plausible definition. It meets, it's quite fair in how we usually use this word in a kind of a broad context. He seems to be getting it from a pretty decent source. So this is reasonable, and this is good form on his part. Now, I will say something that's important here is towards the end of this debate, Abu Noori, he says that Godlogic agreed in this debate to not use a Christian definition of God. He said he wasn't going to come to the debate with an Islamic, definition. He said Godlogic agreed not to come with a Christian conception. They were going to kind of just use it like a secular definition of God. And if that is the case, and if they agreed upon that, then Noori seems to be playing by those rules here. Now, I will say that I reached out both to Noori and to Godlogic yesterday to see if they could clarify on this. I was like, is this recorded somewhere? Are there pictures of this? Because this is going to be relevant as the debate goes on. Neither one of them got back to me. I don't know if they ever will, so I don't really want to prolong putting this out. I saw Godlogic on TikTok. I'm doing live streams quite a bit yesterday, so I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a reason he shouldn't have been able to see my message, so I'm just going to assume that he isn't going to respond. So with all that said, let's keep going.
Being believed to control some part of the universe or life, often worshipped, or a representation of this being, the god of war. Why does this matter to a Bible-believing Christian? They say that the Bible says that there is only one God. They say that there's only one true God, their triune God, Yahweh. A majority of Christians have not read their Bible.
So I want to pause here and note God, as it was just defined by Abu Noori, like Christians already, like if they just have a moment of reflection, they're all going to recognize that there are multiple beings that fit something like this description. Most Christians are going to affirm the existence of something referred to as angels. That term's not super precise, but it's a decent enough designator. Most Christians are going to say, yeah, there are these spiritual beings. They are powerful. They exist in the spiritual realm. Maybe they're sometimes worshipped by other people. They're seen as having authority and control over certain things, so on and so forth. Like most Christians, by the broad definition that he just gave, like they're not going to contest this. And so this is one of the reasons that one of the things in this debate I kind of feel like is like, yeah, Nora, you're not saying anything new here, man. Like this isn't really as clever as you think it is. Like you gave this broad definition. It's a fair definition. It's a broad definition. And yeah, by this definition of God, like we think there's multiple of these. Like that's not super controversial. Even whether or not these beings are referred to as gods or whatever, like there are multiple beings that, fit this description. But Nori thinks this is going to be a gotcha because he thinks that we like have to affirm the existence of one God, no matter how that term is defined. And this is something that I've talked about in my work. Like it just doesn't matter whether or not you define, whether or not your worldview has more than one God. It's just going to depend on how broadly or how loosely a God is defined. So if I define a God as any spiritual being that has any type of power or any type of authority, I was like, okay, I mean that's pretty broad. Maybe in Islam, your angels and your jinn would meet that definition of a God. Are you going to be too troubled by that now? No, probably not. And so similarly, if you define a God very broadly under a Christian conception, like okay, like sure, maybe we have multiple gods according to that definition. Like this just isn't an interesting debate. And so we'll keep going. But I will say like this is important because even though to me this isn't an interesting this isn't going to be super meaningful into the Islam Christianity debate, this is nonetheless how the debate is formatted. The debate name is there more than one God in the Bible? And so this is going to come down to how a God is defined. So,
and today we're going to get into the very strange and goofy reality of this Bible.
Okay, so I'm actually gonna just skip a significant portion of his opening statements and summarize it because it's long-winded and I can just summarize it quicker and it'll save redundancy. So what Nori does in his opening statement is he points to a bunch of instances, or he points to the idea that the Old Testament authors drew on ideas, motif, or literature in the ancient Near East, specifically stuff from Canaanite culture. So he goes to stuff like stuff in the Psalms about Yahweh fighting or crushing or piercing Lotan, Leviathan, and he essentially says, look, the Bible, it copied from, it quotes directly from pagan sources. Why is this going on? And that is significantly most of his opening statement from here on out. It's kind of slow and long-winded, and it's kind of repetitive. And so to this, I'm just going to jump through that and I'll make this summarizing more here. I think we'll discuss this a little bit more as we go forward. Yeah, this isn't surprising. Like, this is really well known in like Christian scholarship or biblical scholarship in general. The Bible, the Old Testament, was written by humans, by people who were in a specific culture. And when they were trying to communicate their ideas to other people in that culture, they used images, motifs, things familiar in that culture. So just like you and I might draw on things in our culture to express an idea, they did the same. And because they were in a culture or near a culture in which they were hearing stories about how a Canaanite god did X, Y, or Z, or because they were in a culture where sea monsters and the sea in general were representative of cosmic chaos and a disorder and stuff like that, they might respond by saying that it is Yahweh who treads upon the waters, or who pierces Leviathan. And in doing so, they are doing at least two things. I think they are combating the idea that Baal, who is someone that God is Yahweh, is at war with, and the Israelites are tempted to go astray and follow after. He's saying, no, Baal didn't do this. I did this, or the Israelites are saying Yahweh is the one who accomplished these feats. He's the one who is the big great God who should be worshipped. And then they're also conveying the idea that Yahweh is the one who has the power over these forces of chaos and disorder in the ancient world. So really, Noor's opening remark really is quite bad because it just doesn't engage with the prompt. So he starts out by offering a definition of what a god is. We're like, okay, like maybe we're starting to do good. But then he just goes into this diatribe about how the Old Testament draws on this ancient literature. And Godlogic could say, cool, the Old Testament draws on this ancient literature. You haven't addressed the prompt about like what a god, like whether or not there are multiple gods. All that if we just grant everything that Nori says, all that we see is the idea that the Old Testament drew on ancient literature. Nori doesn't understand why, because he just hasn't read on this or hasn't thought about it much. And that Yahweh apparently like fought a sea monster. We have not yet gotten to the idea that there are multiple gods in the Bible. So Nori's argument is very bad. We're going to listen to Godlogic's argument. Godlogic's argument is more relevant to the prompt, but it's still going to have issues, which we'll get into. And then these ideas that I've skipped over, they're going to resurface as the debate goes on. So just for sake of time, I'm just going to summarize and skip like I did there.
All right. Thank you for that, Logic. When you start talking, your 10 minutes will start.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming through. Thanks, Abu Noori, for being brave enough to step up for the Belt Bottom Boys. Look, this is a very simple subject, guys. I don't know what that nonsense was about the Ugaritic tablets and all that kind of stuff, because the topic is there more than one God in the Bible? That's what the topic is. And so here's what's interesting, guys. What's interesting is that the Bible is actually very clear that Israel, throughout generation and generation and generation, were polytheists. They seeped into polytheism generation after generation after generation. So coming up with, Israel was influenced by polytheism, or was related to polytheistic beliefs, the Bible says that. Surprise, this is the Bible. The Bible says that Israel fell into polytheism over and over again, and they got corrected. Now the question is not about what did Israel believe, what did the biblical authors believe? What did the prophets say? And so this is what we're going to get into, ladies and gentlemen. What do the biblical authors believe in regards to their theology? Now, in regards to monotheism, there's a lot of different aspects of monotheism. As a matter of fact, because monotheism is actually relatively new. You know what I'm saying? It's relatively new. There wasn't really this concept of monotheism necessarily in ancient times. And so today we're just going to use monotheism in the colloquial sense, or
No, he's not. Okay, so this is simply wrong. He is about, so if I was to ask 100 people, what does the word monotheism mean? They would say belief in one God. That simple, right? Now, there's the debate in scholarship about, the word monotheism and how well does it describe ancient Israel and how to catch out that term. But the colloquial sense of that word is there more than one God? And if we were actually going by the colloquial sense of that word, it would be fair to argue for it. And in doing that, that would be relevant to the debate, right? But that is not how Godlogic defines it. Here in a second, he's going to define it in a way that's very specific. Let's hear how he defines it.
Like, we're going to use Hebner's definition, where he says that monotheism is the belief in one true God and the implicit or explicit exclusion of other gods as non-existent, as demons, or something else, something other than the actual true God, creator of heaven and earth, uncaused cause of all things. Okay, so this.
Okay, everybody, he just lost the debate here, right? This is the beginning of where he loses the debate, because in order to win a debate, you have to actually argue for the debate topic. Now, what did he just do? All right, we're going to walk through this slowly. The debate topic is there more than one God in the Bible? And here's what Godlogic did. He took the word monotheism, which it would be, like in a colloquial sense, it would just be the idea that there's more than one God. So if he was actually arguing for monotheism, defined in the sense of, is there more than one, is there one God, is there more than one God, that would be synonymous with the debate topic if he used it in that normal everyday sense. But that's not what he does. He takes the word monotheism, and he defines monotheism as being there is only one of a certain type of God. And the type of God that his definition of monotheism says there's only one of is a God that has these attributes of uncaused, created, sovereign, all this stuff that he just said, that he just listed, the attributes that we would normally attribute to Yahweh. And he's defining monotheism as the belief that there's only one of that type of God and all others excluded from it. It's like, okay, but that's not the debate topic. The debate topic is not, is there more than one uncaused cause in the Bible? The debate topic is not, is there more than one true God in the Bible? The debate topic is there more than one God? And so what Godlogic has done here, subtly to people who aren't paying attention, but as someone like me, who, if you had a background in philosophy, you pay attention to the terms and how things are being defined, this is just a flagrant changing of the topic. Because now what Godlogic can do, and this is what he does through the entire debate, is anytime someone points to instances in the Old Testament where it is clearly the case that there are multiple gods, he is going to say, oh, but those aren't the special type of God. They aren't the true God. They aren't the God by nature. And he defines God by nature as these beings who are the ultimate cause of everything else, eternal, so on and so on. Essentially the Yahweh attributes, right? Of, the omnis, the sovereignty, the cause of everything, uncreated, stuff like that. He packs that in to a couple of phrases that he utilizes. And he says, well, they're not that type of God. But that is not the debate topic. At this point, Godlogic is changing the debate topic. And so at this point, if he's arguing for this, he's not actually arguing for the topic of the debate. And this is why, as this progresses, I'm going to say Godlogic loses this debate because he's not staying on topic, right? So this is subtle if you're not paying attention, but it is extremely significant. Now, I want to make clear to everyone, it is very well known and very well recognized among scholars of a wide variety of backgrounds that the Old Testament clearly presents the idea of there being multiple gods. I talk about this a good bit in my book, The Devil's Disbarment. I'll give you a couple of examples that I talk about in that book. Here's one of the go-to instances of this. Psalm 82. God, so this is using Elohim as a proper name for Yahweh. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. In the ancient Near East, there was this conception that the high God, often referred to in Canaanite, pantheon as El, they had a divine council with the, lesser gods or the sons of gods and so on and so forth, that, the high God presided over. And this Psalm 82, it is drawing on that concept, it is drawing on that imagery. It is saying you've got God, Yahweh, who has taken his place in the divine council, in the council of the gods, right? In the midst of the gods. So there's multiple gods, and he's in the midst of them. He holds judgments. And then what follows in that psalm is a rebuke of the gods who are in there who have misused their authority. And there's one point in this psalm where Yahweh is depicted as saying to these other gods, I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. So the idea that Yahweh is saying to these other gods is, hey, you're all gods, you're sons of the Most High, but despite that, you're going to end up dying like a mint. You're going to be mortal, and you're going to die just like them. And this is because of their corruption. There are numerous instances of this throughout the Bible. I give a list of examples of this in my book. I'll read you a couple. Psalm 86:8. There is none like you among the gods, O Lord, nor are there any works like yours. Psalm 96:4. For great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. Psalm 97:7. All worshippers of images are put to shame, who make their boast in worthless idols. Worship him, all you gods. The psalmist is telling the gods in heaven to worship Yahweh. Psalm 97:9. For you, O Lord, are most high over all the earth. You are exalted far above all gods. I could go on, and I could, multiply these examples such as this, quite a lot. We have instances where Yahweh speaks and he says things that are indicative of the reality of other gods. For example, we see the Lord saying in Jeremiah 10:11, the gods who did not make the heavens and the earth shall perish from the earth and from under the heavens. It would be difficult for these gods to perish if they never existed. Similarly, in Exodus 12:12, we see Yahweh say, for I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. It's going to be kind of hard to pass judgment on these gods of Egypt if they don't even exist for you to judge, right? So there's an enormous amount of data in the Old Testament that affirms the reality that there are other gods. And this is not problematic when you recognize that the word that is translated God in your English Bible, when you're looking in the Old Testament, the word that's translated God is Elohim. And Elohim is used in a broader sense than just to refer to this specific set of attributes that we generally refer to as Yahweh. God, or Elohim in the Old Testament, that does not contain within it omnipotent, omniscient, eternal, creator, everything. That's not contained in that world. Nor in general is the concept of a God, just in general, in many cultures, that term, God, Theos, Elohim, however you want to use it, it doesn't contain those concepts. This is why in Greek religions, Zeus is a god, Hades is a god, Ares is a god. None of them are uncreated. None of them are omnipotent, but they're still referred to as gods because that definition that Nouri offered in the beginning, it is a pretty decent general definition of what a god is. So right off the bat here, Godlogic has changed the debate topic. He's got, and it just goes downhill from here. You cannot deny that there's more than one God. There's more than one Elohim in the Bible. The scripture is abundantly clear about this. And you can say, but they're not Elohim that are of this certain type. You can say they don't have this, all this set of properties. That's not the debate topic.
This is what we mean by monotheism. Now, Abu Noori was very clear. He said that he's here to try to prove that there are actual gods by nature, like they're actual deities. And so let's see if the Bible teaches this. If the Bible teaches that there are actual gods by nature. So
he's about to butcher this.
Let's get into it, y'all, because y'all know the only thing we do around here is we just read. So look.
I'm sorry, I'm going to pause on rant for this. Oh, we just read. This is silly. I see Godlogic say this. No, you don't. You don't just read. You bring your presumptions to the text. You bring your biases. Everybody does. Everybody brings their presumptions to the text. Everybody has to interpret the text. And you, specifically in this video, you shoehorn your theology into the text. So this fun little, we just read, it's cute, and your fan club might let you get away with it. No, that's not all you do. And we're going to talk about how you butcher the text here.
Here's Deuteronomy 32:17. Which he's gonna try to go to later on in his rebuttal round, and we're gonna have fun with this. Here's Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 17, y'all. It says, they sacrificed to demons that were not God, to gods they had never known, to new gods that had come recently, whom your fathers had never dreaded. According to the Bible, are these true gods by nature? No, these are demons that they're.
Okay, let's pause and talk about this. Okay, so let's just start by just breaking down this verse because my gosh, Godlogic. Okay, so they sacrificed to demons that were not God. The word that's translated demon there is shadim. It is a word that probably comes from an Akkadian word that has to do with a territorial spirit. And the idea of it being a demon, that is not in and of itself in conflict with the idea of it being a god. So Michael Heiser, who is an Old Testament scholar that both of these guys are going to draw on, right? Both of these guys are going to appeal to Heiser throughout this debate. So I'm going to read for you a section from one of his works. So Heiser says in a paper specifically talking about this chapter and some of these verses we're going to get into, he says, a singular translation makes it clear that Israel committed apostasy, but implies that the gods to whom the Israelites sacrificed were real but inferior to the God of Israel. The singular choice identifies the gods as demons and vice versa. The demon gods must be conceived of as actual entities, since it is obvious that the biblical worldview included demons. That the text calls those gods demons does not soften the theological implications, since demons were widely conceived of as deities in the wider Semitic culture of the biblical world. Now, that is in a paper where Heiser this is called Does Deuteronomy 32:17 Assume or Deny the Reality of Other Gods? And one of the things that Heiser is talking about there is whether or not Deuteronomy 32:17 should be translated as they sacrificed to demons that were not God, singular, or they sacrificed to demons that were not gods, plural. And Heiser is arguing for the singular definition, which is what you see on screen in front of you in the translation that Godlogic is using. And this is significant because if it is a singular term here, and this is related to what Heiser argues, this verse is not saying, hey, these are demons that they're not gods. It is saying they are demons. They are these territorial spirits that are not God. God, Elohim, in that singular way that it's used there, it is pointing to Yahweh, because the word Elohim, it is sometimes used to refer to the generic deities of other nations and these what Godlogic would call not true gods. It is often used as a proper name for Yahweh, the God of Israel. So it is here saying they sacrifice to demons. But those demons, they weren't God. They weren't Yahweh. And then immediately after it, it says, to gods they had never known. So it explicitly says that they are gods that they had not known and that they were new gods. So if you think that verse 17, that this first section, if you think this is denying that the things were actually gods, you're going to have a contradiction in the next two sentences. Or not, it's not even it's not even a full sentence. It's like in the next words, you're going to have a contradiction. And you're also going to have a contradiction towards the end of that passage, where the speaker says, rejoice with him, O heavens, bow down to him, all gods. So this is the very passage that Godlogic is going to here, because he thinks it's so clear. It does not say, it uses a term that in the ancient culture would have been used to refer to a deity. It's saying that they're not Yahweh. It's not denying that they're gods at all, or gods, actually, or anything like that. The very next words do affirm that they are gods, and then the author later refers to a plurality of gods and tells them to worship Yahweh. But now I want to back up a little bit and note something that Godlogic does here.
According to the Bible, are these true gods by nature? No.
Wait. True gods by nature. What is that language coming from? Everyone look at that verse. Where do you see the words true God by nature? This is something that irritates me throughout this. Is Godlogic, he sprinkles in these terms. Oh, they're not true gods by nature. What are you talking about, dude? The verse says nothing about whether they're gods by nature, however you want to use that term. It says nothing about whether or not they're true gods. All this thing is saying is you sacrificed to these type of spirits that were not Yahweh. They were new. You hadn't known them before, right? Or something along those lines. And what we're going to see is, remember that Godlogic, he comes to use the word God by nature. He comes to use that to refer to Yahweh attributes, right? These type of, eternal, creator, everything, stuff like that. That's not the debate topic. And this is something I'm going to consistently call him out for. He didn't just read, right? He did not just read here. He read and then he inserted his theology. Oh, they're not gods by nature. They're not true gods by nature. That is not in the text. He is doing not just reading. He's eisegeting here. He's not exegeting.
These are demons that they're worshiping. Demons that they're sacrificing to. Let's keep going. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 11, it says, has a nation changed its gods, even though they are no gods? Looks like the Bible is explicit that these things that they worship, these objects of worship, these idols,
The what, Godlogic? The idols? Oh, so this is talking about idols here? Let's play with that idea. So let's go to, Heiser talks about this a little bit in the paper that I was talking about. So there is language in the Bible where the author or speaker is referring to idols. An idol is a physical object, right? It is a physical object that was used in worship. Long story short, the idol was used to presence the deity. There was kind of a sense of like the deity would come down and inhabit the idol and present the deity to them. I'm not getting into the specifics of that, but it is a it's made of some type of physical medium that they would carve, they would make, and they would sit it in a place, and then they would treat it like it is the god. So there are instances in the Old Testament where idols, these physical things, are described in this way as being not God. So here are some instances. So 2 Kings 19:18 and Isaiah 37:19. They put their gods into the fire, for they were not gods. Jeremiah 2:11, he obviously read that on screen. Jeremiah 16:20, can a man make for himself gods? They are not gods. Hosea 8:6, a craftsman made it. It is not a god. The thing that it is saying, I think this, Godlogic admitted this, the thing that it is saying is not a god, is a physical object. It's an idol that they're saying is not a god. And if we look at Jeremiah and the passage that he's talking about there, we actually have reasons to think, even in that chapter, that it's referring to idols. So let's go to Jeremiah 2:11. So this is the section she's talking about. Has a nation changed its God, even though they are no gods? But my people have changed their glory for that which does not profit. So the idea here is the Israelites, they took something valuable, which is their glory with Yahweh, and they're exchanging it for something that is worthless. It's of no profit. If I understand correctly, the word that's used for changed here, I think it can have even the meaning of like bartering, like exchanging, right? Now, there's a continual stuff in this passage, but if we go down to the bottom, so if we look to verse 28, but where are your gods that you made for yourself? So there is indication in Jeremiah 2:11 that what is being referred to here is idols. And Godlogic admits it's referring to idols. Idols, the physical divine images, that is what is not a god. But that is completely consistent with saying that in the ancient world and in the ancient, Hebrew text, the beings that were seen as being behind the idols, the beings that are depicted as, being called Shadim in the previous verse that we looked at, those are gods. Like, these things are not contradictory. So this is just sloppy. And I want to talk about at least two more aspects of this. So here's another thing. It frustrates me that Godlogic, when we have passages like Psalm 82, which explicitly says God takes his seat, in the council of the gods, in the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. When we have Yahweh specifically speaking to spiritual beings and saying, you are gods, that's not clear. Oh no, that's not clear. But if we go to Jeremiah 2:11, where it says, even though they are no gods, well, now all of a sudden the Bible's perfectly clear. Like, this is just hypocrisy. He's picking the verses he wants, and he's saying these are perfectly clear, and then he's doing the my Bible verse can beat up your Bible verse. Anytime we have a verse that clearly affirms the reality of other gods, he takes his verses and he uses them to beat up the verses that are being raised against him. And it's just nonsense. Now, here's the thing. I talked about the idea that what's being referred to as idols. I think that's very probable that is what's going on here. But there's something else that I want to bring up related to this, right? So maybe you say, hey, James, it actually isn't referring to idols, even though later in the chapter it makes it pretty clear it's referring to idols. And even though Godlogic just admitted that this is referring to idols. So let's go down to Deuteronomy 32. That verse that we just left, that he was just looking at. So this is Deuteronomy, this is 32, the chapter we were just in, and this is verse 21. They have made me jealous with what is no God. They have provoked me to anger with their idols. So, now listen to this. So I will make them jealous with those who are no people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. Interesting. With no people, who are no people. And then it seems like Yahweh is putting that in parallel with the idea of he will provoke them with a foolish nation. So what's going on here? Is Yahweh saying that this foolish nation, that there's actually no people in that nation that he's going to use to provoke Israel? Is that what he's saying? No. The idea of they are a no people is the idea of they are insignificant. They are nothing. Comparable to you and comparable to me, they are worthless, they're evil, these are comparative statements in Deuteronomy 32:21. If Godlogic wants to slap the table and stomp his feet about they are no gods language in Jeremiah 2:11. I sure want to see him be consistent in Deuteronomy 32:21, which is the chapter he just left, where Yahweh says that I will make them jealous with those who are no people. What do you think that's meaning? Okay, take your flaming literalism, God logic, and apply that to that passage. And are there no nations outside of Israel? Are none of the nations, I mean, the Assyrians and these other nations that, God uses to punish Israel, these nations that we would call, foolish nations, and, God calls them that. Like, are none of them actually people? No, of course not. This language of no God, no people, this is oftentimes, I think, comparative. It is like saying this debate was a nothing burger, right? It is saying it's nothing, it's worthless. This is comparable to language that we see in the Old Testament, where Yahweh says things like, there is none beside me, there is no other, so on and so forth. Those are passages which depict Yahweh as there being none like him. So first off, God logic, it seems to admit, or he at least lets slip, that this is referring to idols. And yeah, idols, those physical objects, those aren't gods. It says nothing about the actual spiritual beings that are in the heavenly host and whether or not the ancient Israelites thought they were God. Yahweh seems to think that they're God, according to Psalm 82. So it says nothing about that. And then even if I set that aside, even if we think this is referring to the spiritual, beings, then why should we interpret this differently than how Deuteronomy 32:21 says, God's going to provoke them with a people, or those who are no people? Why cannot this be a comparative statement? Because that would actually preserve the logic of the entirety of the Old Testament. So God logic, he gets so cocky about a handful of verses that he butchers in this debate, and it lights a fire on me, because it doesn't just stop here. He's going to misrepresent Heiser later too. So let's just keep going.
Gods of the nations are not actual gods by nature, but are...
Oh, there it is again, by nature. Does everyone see that? He keeps slipping this word in, right? Because remember, he redefined monotheism. So now it's, but they're not gods by nature. And at this point, he hasn't clarified what God by nature is. Later, Noori is going to, Abu Noori is going to ask him, I think, about that, and he's going to clarify what it means. And as I said, it's going to be these Yahweh properties. But that's not the debate topic. So it's always, but they're not the right type of God.
Demons, our idols, are worthless. Let's keep going. Here's Psalm 96, verse 5. For all the gods of the peoples are worthless idols, but the Lord Yahweh made the heavens. You guys see that? Now,
I've already addressed that in my previous stuff. He's outside of his depth here.
Now let's make this clear, because I like for us to see the name of God. So this can't be any mistake here. So in Psalm 96, it says, but Yahweh made the heavens, for all the gods of the peoples are idols. They're nothing. They're worthless. They don't actually exist.
That is not what it is saying. It is not. So first off, even the idols clearly exist. Like, the idols are clearly, like, the physical objects are there. It is saying, yeah, these gods you guys have, these are idols. They're worthless. You can refer to either the idols or the spiritual beings and say, this is nothing, this is worthless. You can do all of that without denying that there are real spiritual entities in the Old Testament world that are referred to as gods, Elohim, Theos, whatever, and that they meet the general colloquial profile of what a god is. So no, this isn't the dub that God logic thinks it is.
That's what the Bible authors are teaching. Let's keep going, guys. So let's see here. Galatians chapter 4, verse 8. However, at that time, when you did not know God, you were slaves to those which by nature are no gods. What are we doing here, man? What are we doing here, Bell Boy?
Okay, so this is where it just gets even more embarrassing for God logic. Okay, so this verse, right, in Galatians 4:8, what is it talking about? When he says, at that time, when you did not know God, you were enslaved to those which by nature are not gods, what is he referring to? What were the things they were enslaved to? The God logic says he just reads. So how about you read the rest of the verse, God logic? Formerly, when you did not know God, you were enslaved to those that by nature are not gods. But now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how can you turn back again to the weak and worthless elementary principles of the world? Now, this phrase there that's used, that's translated to elementary principles. Heiser has I think it was a podcast episode where he talks about this a good bit in depth. I'll put that on screen for the people who are listening listening. The Greek here is, I believe, it's stukion. And Heiser outlines that there's roughly 4 different meanings for this meaning for this word. One of the meanings is kind of the elementary stuff of the universe, like the basic physical building blocks. But one of the meanings that Heiser talks about, I'm going to kind of summarize here, is this has a meaning of, could be referring to celestial bodies. So like moon, stars, physical objects that existed in the night sky. And Heiser is going to say, actually, Heiser thinks that there's kind of a dual meaning going on here. He thinks that Galatians has a dual audience of Jews and Gentiles. And so he thinks Paul is kind of saying something that has a meaning for the Jews and for the Gentiles. The Gentiles is what's going to be relevant to us. So in the ancient world, there was the idea that the physical celestial objects that we see in the night sky, they either were gods, they were deities, or they were controlled by deities, and that the movement of the celestial objects impacted your life. It had some type of control over you. And so what Paul is referring to here is he uses a term that would have picked out those celestial objects. And he's saying, don't go back to, worshiping these things, which by their nature are not gods. So what is the thing that is being referred to as not God by nature? It's not the spiritual beings who are in the heavenly host. It is the physical objects in the night sky that they mistakenly interpret to either be gods or to be influenced by the gods in which to control their lives. And if you have any doubt that this is what it's talking about, that there's like astrology that is being attacked here by Paul, how about you just read the next verse, Godlogic, where it says, you observe days and months and seasons and years. I'm afraid I may have labored over you in vain. Now, if this is referring to them, being obsessed with the celestial objects in the sky, and, kind of the astrology stuff of we're going to watch the years and the seasons and how are the stars moving and stuff like that, then it makes perfect sense. This meaning that I just described, which again is a plausible use of that Greek word. So what Godlogic did here is he went and he found something that he thought supported his point. He didn't just read, he just inserted his view into the text. And I recognize, I really want to be chill when I do these. I really want to be chill when I want to be like laid back, but I get so frustrated. And listen, I think I would be less frustrated with Godlogic if he wasn't such a cocky jerk. He is such a cocky, obnoxious jerk in this. And he is a cocky, obnoxious jerk while he's getting it wrong, while he's butchering it. So, okay, so to summarize this, and I'll try to chill out a little bit. So in this passage in Galatians 4:8, as Heiser talks about in the stuff I'll put on screen, and as I just outlined, Paul is telling them, these things that you guys were obsessed with, these elementary principles, the things in the heavens that you guys think are gods or controlled by them, don't go back to those. Those things aren't gods. And as Heiser points out, like Paul was a Jew. He knew his Old Testament. He knew what actually was by nature gods. But here's what's important about this. Godlogic, this which by nature are no gods, this phrase is a battering ram throughout the rest of the debate. I'm going to keep pointing it out when it happens. This by nature are no gods, man, it's just like he uses it. This one passage, which he mistranslates and he doesn't understand what's going on, he misuses it as a battering ram for the rest of the debate.
According to the Bible, it is explicit. It's not hinting. There's no confusion. According to the Bible, these gods are not gods by nature.
No, remember, it's the celestial objects in the night sky, which they thought were gods. And in fact, here in a second, Godlogic and them, when they get, I think, into their cross-exam, they're going to go to a passage in the Old Testament which explicitly depicts how the ancients, how they viewed the objects in the night sky as being God. So we're going to look at a verse later where it's on full display how the celestial objects in the night sky, how they were viewed as being gods in the ancient world. And Paul is saying those things are not gods.
Rather, they are demons, idols, figments of imagination, figments and creations of the human mind.
Paul never gives the idea. Paul does not give the idea that these things are just, creations of the human minds. And he wouldn't, because unlike Godlogic, he knows the Old Testament. He knows the Old Testament about the language of the sons of God in Deuteronomy 32. He knows the language in Psalm 82 about, I said ye are gods, sons of the Most High. He knows about the watchers in Daniel. He knows about all that stuff. Paul, Ron Johnson, in his dissertation, which I believe is freely available online, talks about this ancient ideas of divine plurality in the Old Testament, and how Paul picks up that language and how Paul utilizes that language in some of his stuff. In fact, Heiser and I think Johnson also, they talk about how the stuff in Deuteronomy 32, how that gets picked up, and I believe it's in First Corinthians, when Paul is talking about idols, and how the things that they offer to idols, they are offering to demons. Godlogic just doesn't know what he's talking about here.
They are not truly God by nature. Let's keep going. First Corinthians chapter 10, verse 20. Watch what he says here. No, but I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God.
And what is a demon in the ancient world? Godlogic. A demon in the ancient world, in the Shadim and like the Deuteronomy 32, which this is a passage I think scholars would say that Paul is drawing from. The demon, the Shadim, those are territorial spirits. They are spirits that would have been viewed as being deities of some type. And Paul says they're not God. God, Theos, in Paul, is usually referring to the Father. So Paul is saying, yeah, you're sacrificing to these other spirits, these other real things, not imaginary things in your mind. These real spirits that are evil and they're they're bad and they're out to get you. Like there's stuff in the Old Testament about how they're going to be a snare to the people, so on and so forth. He's saying you're sacrificing to these evil spirits, but not to God, not to Yahweh, the God of Israel. And he doesn't want you to become sharers in demons. So yeah, this is just, it's so bad.
And I do not want you to become sharers in demons. The Bible is explicit. The Bible is clear. There is no other God other than the true God, Yahweh. Are you guys confused about that? Let's see. Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 10, 11. The only thing we do is read, ladies and gentlemen.
Nope. No, you read Deuteronomy 32 and you started inserting stuff about, oh, God's by nature. You read Galatians 4:8 and you inserted, oh, well, this is about the spiritual beings, not what Paul actually says, which are the elementary principles. Again, it's his, oh, we just read this. Oh, this is so cute. This is so snarky. He thinks he's being cute with this. No, he's not. He's just misrepresenting, and he's blind to his own ignorance here.
But Yahweh is the true God. Ain't nobody
All God's people said amen.
else. Yahweh is the true God. He's the only one who's God by nature.
That's not what the passage says. Everyone look and see, where does it say the word nature there? Everyone, I don't see the word nature in this passage.
Is the living God and the everlasting King. At his wrath the earth quakes, and the nations cannot endure indignation. Thus you shall say to them, the gods that did not make the heavens and the earth will perish from the earth under the heavens.
Yeah, how can they perish from under the earth and from under the heavens if they don't exist?
From under the heavens. So why is it that we see God putting the Leviathan in a chokehold? Why is it that we see God trampling the heads of the serpent, trampling over Baal, trampling over the gods of Babylon, over the gods of Egypt? Why? Because they are not truly God, but God has power over them. They do not exist, and that's why they...
Where are you getting this idea they don't exist? How is God going to destroy them if they don't exist, Godlogic? Seriously, like sound out what you're saying. If the gods don't exist, how can they perish from the earth and from under the heavens? How can anything perish from under the earth if it doesn't exist? And again, I'm going to go to Psalm 82, where Yahweh says to them, "You are gods." Yahweh is the speaker. He's not on earth. There's no mistake in this. Maybe it's an idol. There's nothing like that can happen. He is in the heavens, in the divine council, in the midst of the gods, plural. And he says to them, "You are gods." Please explain. Is Yahweh having an imaginary conversation with himself? Is he just spitting to nobody up there?
Perish under the earth and under the heaven, because they are not the ones who created all things. Yahweh is the true God. Thank you, Abu Noori, for quoting those passages.
Notice he's arguing that there's only one true God, which is not the debate topic.
Messages and proving my point. It's because that's why. Let's keep going. Now, when it comes to who God is, now our Abu Noori is going to try to make the argument later on, ladies and gentlemen. He's going to try to make the argument that El or Elyon is different from Yahweh. El or Elyon meaning most high in the Hebrew. He's going to try to make the argument according to Deuteronomy that Elyon is different from Yahweh. So Let's look at him. He's saying, like, yep, he knows my argument. Absolutely. So let's go ahead and nip that in the bud right now. Watch this, ladies and gentlemen. This is Genesis. This is Genesis chapter 14, verse 22. It says, then Abram.
I've been pretty harsh on Godlogic up to this point. This section that he's about to talk about here, I'm going to be in large agreement with him on. I think he does get this right. And Heiser has stuff talking about this.
Said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to Yahweh, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. Now, in the Hebrew, ladies and gentlemen, watch what it says. It says in the Hebrew, Yahweh Elyon. Elyon. Yahweh and Elyon are one and the same. These are not two different entities. Let's keep going. Numbers 23:8. How shall I curse whom El, or God, has not cursed? And how can I denounce whom Yahweh has not denounced? El and Yahweh are one and the same. These are not two different entities. Let's keep going. We just read Psalm 97, verse 9. For you are Yahweh Elyon, Most High, over all the earth. You are exalted far above the gods, Elohim. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen.
What is he far exalted above, over? According to what Godlogic was saying a while ago, what Godlogic is exalted far above is things that don't exist, imaginary things in our mind. Well, guess what, Godlogic? I'm exalted above non-existent things too. So how is this setting Yahweh apart if the gods don't actually exist, my man?
So there's no confusion. There's no confusion over which who Elyon is, who the Most High is, who Yahweh is. They are one in the same. So with this being said, I'm going to show some other stuff later on. We're going to have some fun. But I want to give some scholarship here because we even have scholars, biblical scholars, linguistics, professors at university, like, for example, Otto Eisfeld, who says that the author of Deuteronomy 32, the author intentionally avoided using the active verbal form so as not to say that Elyon gave Yahweh anything, that he gave the inheritance or Israel to Yahweh. We're going to see this later on, guys. Michael Heiser, he says that the council language, or the host, or the assembly, the divine council, that this language is not oppositional to monotheism. You could.
Well, let's pause that. So let's be really clear about how Heiser uses terms like monotheism and henotheism and whatnot, how he views these things. Let me read to you some quotes from Heiser on this. So this is reading from one of Mike Heiser's papers, which I'll put on screen. Does the affirmation of the reality of other Elohim by the canonical authors disqualify Israelite religion as monotheistic? Or other terms used in academic discourse for ancient religious pantheons more appropriate? The short answer to both questions in the view of this writer is a qualified no. The answer is qualified with respect to the realization that little is solved by applying or refusing to apply a single modern term to Israel's ancient view of God. Monotheism as a term was coined in the 17th century not as an antonym to polytheism, but to atheism. A monotheist, then, was a person who believed there was a God, not someone who believed there was only one spiritual entity that could or should be named by the letters G-O-D. This understanding of the term has been lost in contemporary discourse, and so it would be pointless to call for its reintroduction. Now, he jumps down a little. We're going to jump down roughly a page or so in that same work to read another passage he says related to this. So this is what Heiser says, and this is towards kind of the endish. This is towards the end of this paper. He says, the proposal offered here is that scholars should stop trying to define Israel's religion with singular, imprecise modern terms and instead stick to describing what Israel believed. Monotheism, as it is currently understood, means that no other gods exist. This term is inadequate for describing Israelite religion, but suggesting it be done away with would no doubt cause considerable consternation among certain parts of the academic community, not to mention the interested laity. In another work, Heiser says something is going to be an indictment to how Godlogic argues in his thing. He says this listing alone, so he lists several different ways that the word Elohim is used in the Old Testament. He says this listing alone should inform biblical scholars of something critical to the discussion, but which seems to have gone unnoticed. The fact that the biblical writers could use Elohim Elohim of more than one entity or figure, all of which are elsewhere described in far lesser terms than Yahweh, tells us clearly that they did not exclusively associate the term Elohim with a set of unique attributes. For moderns, that assumption is reflexive. The word God immediately takes the mind to the singular being conceived of as the God of the Bible. Consequently, the mention of other Elohim conjures unease for the modern interpreter, no matter how clear the biblical text is in regard to this variegated usage. However, the biblical writer did not think about Elohim the way moderns think about God. It would have been absurd to the biblical writers to suggest that a dear departed relative, now an Elohim in Sheol, like Samuel, was on ontological par with Yahweh and the Elohim of his counsel. But any argument that insists that toleration of plural Elohim evinces polytheism assumes this logic. If one assumes the biblical writer had a specific set of attributes in mind when describing an entity with the word Elohim, then there is no escape from this point of incoherence. And if one retreats the argument that Elohim differed their attributes, then the term Elohim can no longer be associated with a consistent set of attributes. So the reason I read this is what Godlogic is doing. Heiser, and in multiple of his works, he specifically speaks out against this idea of taking the word Elohim or God and associating with it these very specific attributes that one has usually associates with Yahweh, the God of Israel. But that's what Godlogic's doing. He's taking those terms, he's applying it and saying, well, they don't have these attributes, therefore they're not really an Elohim. They're not Elohim by nature. And Heiser, the person that Godlogic is citing in his favor, would fight him on this. It is so misrepresentative to appeal to Heiser on in this kind of discussion when Heiser would be slapping down the arguments that Godlogic is giving down and the suggestion that these aren't really Elohim.
You can have the divine council or the divine assembly, the Elohim which God rules over and judges over. You can have this concept without being in opposition to monotheism. Okay,
monotheism according to the ad hoc the ad hoc definition that he gives us in the beginning, where monotheism was redefined as being the only one of a certain type of God. But if you only have one of a certain type of God and you have other gods, even if they don't fit that type, they're still gods. Godlogic.
Mark Smith says the same thing. Mark Smith says that the divine assembly is not opposing to monotheism. Now, here's the interesting.
And how are they defining monotheism?
Smith, he was a professor at Princeton Theological Seminary.
1 minute left.
And so, thank you. In his book, In Translation, he says this. This is what he says: that the passages like Deuteronomy 32, for example, that talks about how the Most High divided the nations amongst the people, but Yahweh took in Israel as his inheritance. He says that the composer of Deuteronomy 32 likely thought of El or Elion as two titles of Yahweh, as they are elsewhere in the Bible. The passage shows something of the older worldview of translatability of the national gods, even as it ultimately rejects it. So we have biblical scholars acknowledging that Deuteronomy 32 rejects the worldview of actual national deities that actually exist.
That's not what no, don't misrepresent him. What he was talking about there were, oh my gosh, this is horrible. So he read two quotes, all right? Neither one of those quotes was attacking the idea that there were actual deities over the various nations. The section that he just read seemed to be mainly talking about the idea that Yahweh and El were distinct in Deuteronomy 32. I don't think I heard a clear statement about whether or not the sons of God were gods or not, like whether or not they were perceived as being gods. So he's just misrepresenting the scholarship here. Like that's just like that quote. Like, I went back and I listened to it again, and it's mainly about whether or not Yahweh and El were distinct deities.
Okay, I'll rest my place there.
Okay, so at first glance, right, you may think that Godlogic did more about the debate topic than Noori did in their openings, because Noori barely touched it. And Godlogic seems like he touched it if you're not paying attention. But because Godlogic redefined the debate in the beginning to be, okay, now what we're arguing about isn't how many gods there are. Now we're arguing about how many gods there are that fit my little set of properties that I'm concerned about omniscient, eternal, whatever, right? I don't know if he mentions omniscience. I think he mentions eternality, being the creator of all, uncaused, stuff like that. Now it appears as if he's gone with the debate topic, and he's closer than I think Noy was. It's at least closer, but because it's all in this redefined framework, he hasn't gotten any further. And as we go forward, I think Nori, I think he'll get closer to actually arguing his point than he did in his opening statement.
Okay. Now we will go into the 7-minute rebuttal. So, Nori, you got the floor again. As soon as you start, your 7 minutes will start.
Ladies and gentlemen, oh my God, this man has buried and baked himself. Now, what he's tried to do is get ahead of me and try to refute my argument because he thinks he knows it. The sad part for Logic is he's never heard more than three Bible verses from my argument. He doesn't know this argument. He doesn't know the verses, but we're about to acquaint him. Let's very quickly, let me share my screen. So here's Deuteronomy 32. So in the Masoretic text, they've actually altered it from its original reading. The Dead Sea Scrolls, which is to the right, has the original reading. If this is all innocent and there's nothing to see here, then why are your Christians...
Zoom in a little bit more, please. Thank you.
No problem. If there's nothing to see here, why are the transmitters of the Bible corrupting your Bible and changing what it says? So let's read what the
Just so we're all clear, the Masoretic text comes from a Jewish community or a Jewish society that transmitted the Old Testament. Accusing this, there is a change here. There is, I think, a pretty clear change here. And the Masoretic text is improper when it says sons of Israel there, which is he about to talk about. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint are more accurate. It's going to be sons of God. But this, like, accusing this of being like Christians who are saying this is Christians who are changing the text is silly and ignorant. It's these were Jewish, these were Jewish scribes in a Jewish community that did this.
Masoretic text says. It says, when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided humans, he fixed the borders of people according to the number of the sons of Israel. The issue is that this is talking about the Tower of Babel, and Israel wasn't even a thought. Let's read the Dead Sea Scrolls, which the Septuagint also agrees with. The Dead Sea Scrolls reads, when Elyon gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided humanity, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God, the Beneo Elohim. The next verse says, let's pull it up so everybody can actually see it. The very next verse says, but Yahweh's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted inheritance. So we see here two things. We see here that Yahweh is inheriting from Elyon. Elyon didn't say he was going to divide the nations amongst himself and the Beneo Elohim. He said he was going to divide it amongst the Beneo Elohim. Yahweh receives a portion. No problem. Who are these Beneo Elohim that receive nations to be gods over, Mr. Logic? Why is whoever this God Elyon, why is he giving nations and people like Charity, Oprah Winfrey, you get a God, you get a God? Why is he giving gods to the nations? 70 nations. Why? Who are these B'nai Elohim that are inheriting these people and nations? Let's read the Masoretic text, Deuteronomy, not the Masoretic text, the Dead Sea Scrolls here. Deuteronomy 32 and 43. Let's see how they change this. The Masoretic text reads, O nations acclaims his people. One whole verse is missing from your Bible. The next one. For he will avenge the blood of his servants. He will enact revenge on his adversaries. The next part is missing. And his atonement, and make atonement for his land and his people. Dead Sea Scrolls. Rejoice, O heavenly ones, with him. Bow down, all you gods, before him. For he will...
Okay, so I want to pause this here, because here finally Nori is actually getting... So, like, Because listen, Godlogic could butcher his side of the argument. If Nori doesn't actually put something of substance on the table, I can't really. It would be improper for me to declare him the winner. Nori finally is actually starting to get some meat on the bone here. So now, to be fair to Nori, the language about sons of God, that would have been understood as being divine beings in the ancient world. Heiser talks about this. Like the sons of God that are talked about in Deuteronomy 32 earlier, those are clearly divine beings. They're called gods, sons of the Most High in Psalm 32. Just the language of being sons of God would have been understood as being divine beings. Heiser talks about that, and then Psalm 82 supports that. But now we have it more explicitly. Bow down, all you gods, before him. Gods is plural. It is speaking to other beings who are not Yahweh. They're being told to bow down to Yahweh. This is clear evidence of plurality. So at this point, Nori has provided a biblical text which shows that there is more than one God in the Bible.
Avenge the blood of his sons. He will exact vengeance on his adversaries. He will repay those who hate him, and he will make atonement for his people's land. Bow down, all you gods. These heavenly beings that are called gods. Let's go to Psalms 82 very quickly. Psalms 82 says what? God, let me make sure you guys can see it. We don't want you to miss nothing. God takes his place in the divine council. So this council is divine. There goes the essence that Mr. Logic is looking for. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. For how long?
All right, so I'm going to critique him on. I mean, I do think this is the divine council, but if I'm going to critique Godlogic for reading in stuff about essence, I'm going to do the same thing to Nori. It doesn't talk about essence. Like that's just like it's not. At least it's not explicit. Like I don't think reading anything about essence there is improper. And in fact, if I remember properly, Psalm 82. If I remember properly, that would be the divine council. It would be literally translated as the council of El.
Will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hands of the wicked. The gods know nothing. They understand nothing. They walk about in darkness. All of the foundations of the earth are shaken. I didn't know humans shake the foundation of the earth. I say ye are gods, all sons of Elyon. Why does Elyon keep popping up here? Ye are sons. I say ye are gods, sons of Elyon. But you will.
Yeah, so there we have that idea of sons of God being connected with them being gods, by the way. That's a pretty explicit. You are gods, sons of the Most High. So being sons of the Most High is connected with being gods.
Will die like mere mortals. What do you mean I'll die like a mere mortal? I thought these were just regular people. Why is the Bible saying they're going to die like mere mortals and fall like every other prince or ruler? Because they are the rulers of the nations, as we've just talked about in Deuteronomy 32. Rise up, O God, judge the earth, for the nations are your inheritance. He said that Yahweh and Elyon are the same. I thought Deuteronomy 32. Hold on, let's go back. I thought Deuteronomy said that the portion of Yahweh is Jacob. But here it says that the portion of this God being discussed is all the nations. That's because the God being discussed here is Elyon, the one who divides up all the nations, and thus they come back to him.
So this is a bad argument. So the person who's depicted as talking in this is God. So it says God has taken his place in the divine council, here using Elohim probably in the sense of a proper name to refer to the God of Israel. Now there are people who try to make this argument of this is Yahweh who is speaking in El's court, and El's is kind of there in the background. But it is El who is, or excuse me, it is under pretty much either view. It's still Yahweh who's the one who's kind of depicted as presiding, if I remember correctly. Now, if we go down to this bottom portion about "Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations, or all the nations belong to you." So why does the psalmist say that here? The psalmist says that here because he's essentially imploring Yahweh to take back the nations. So Yahweh divided up the nations, as is made explicitly clear from the preceding passages of 82. Yahweh is rebuking these other gods for dealing improperly. And so in response to this, the psalmist is saying to God, arise, judge the earth. The nations belong to you. You are the rightful king. Because there's this idea of even if the gods of the nations are over the different nations, like even if he's other him over them, there's this idea of a longing for Yahweh to take them back, for him to be in authority over all of them. So you have the ESV that translated for you shall inherit all the nations. This is the idea of Yahweh is going to re-inherit the nations. And this is language that gets picked up in the New Testament, and that someone like Mike Heiser is going to say that Paul draws on, is this idea of bringing the nations back under to Yahweh. And another thing I would point out with this is you could say, so some translations render this as all the nations belong to Yahweh. You could say all the nations belong to Yahweh in this sense, while also saying Yahweh has divided them. It's not as if Yahweh ceases to be in control of the nations because he has put other things underneath them. So maybe to give a bit of analogy, a king could designate certain portions of his kingdom to, I don't know, vice regents or other officials, and they could have authority over those various areas. But you could still say to the king, this is your whole kingdom. So this is a bad argument here, and this is something that Heiser attacks, if I remember correctly, in his dissertation, which is available for free online. I don't remember how Godlogic responds to this, but this is just a poor argument.
Very quickly, I want to read you something from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Since Logic wants to talk about all of this, he wants to talk about these terminologies such as nature, etc.
1 minute left.
1 minute left. That's perfect. So this is 4Q4031I. You can find it in verses 30 to 45. Why does the Dead Sea Scroll say the spirits, plural, of the Holy of Holies, plural, the living gods, plural, the spirits of eternal holiness, plural? Who are these eternal living gods, Logic?
Is that it? You're conceding the rest of your time?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Logic is on you. Are you presenting the screen? You want or no?
I'll present my screen. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. So we're gonna go ahead and give it to Logic. Pass it up. Logic. As soon as you start talking, your 7 will start.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So one ear and out the other. One ear and out the other. What I've demonstrated in my opening statement was that the Bible was explicit. It was unequivocal, unambiguous, that these Elohim are not God by nature, but are demons, are spiritual beings, created beings, right?
Again, he just keeps coming back to this God by nature stuff. Oh, they're not God by nature. So he's drawing on his misunderstanding of Galatians 4 there. And he's drawing on, this is the same moving the goalpost fallacy. It's the same no true Scotsman fallacy of, well, yeah, they're gods. Yeah, they're spirits. And yes, the spirits were referred to as Elohim. They were referred to as gods. But they're not this specific type of God. So I'm good to go. So Godlogic, he's not debating the topic.
Idols, worthless idols that are nothing. We was clear in our opening statement. Now, I told you guys where he was going to go, did I not? I told you, and he said, "Oh, you want to get ahead of my argument?" You said exactly what I said you was going to say. Now, let's go here and let's deal with Deuteronomy. See, now, guys, he's saying that Elyon, the Most High, like I said before, is giving Yahweh Israel, that he gave Yahweh Israel. Now, here's the thing about this. Nowhere does it say, anywhere, nowhere does it say that Yahweh was given Israel. It doesn't say that. It just says that Israel became Yahweh's inheritance, that he inherited Jacob. That's all. And like I said, let me read again Otto Eisfeld. He says the author intentionally avoided the active verbal form, meaning to give, like we see Elyon giving to the rest, giving to mankind, setting the boundaries. He actively avoided that when it came to Yahweh, saying, so as to not say that Elyon gave Israel to Yahweh, but only says Israel became the property of Yah. You'll find this in El and Yahweh in his Journal of Semitic Studies, Volume 1, page 29. So even the scholars are understanding that there is no way, shape, or form where Deuteronomy is teaching, or Deuteronomy 32 is teaching that Elyon is some separate deity or higher deity that is supreme over Yahweh, and Yahweh is like the son of Elyon. That is just stupid, okay? Now, when we get to the scripture, I'm about to share my screen real quick. when we get to the scripture, watch what it says here, y'all. We talk about who's dividing the nations, who.
So I'm glad that Godlogic brought this up. So like several stuff here, I don't have a whole lot to critique him on. I think he's making good points. This is similar stuff to what Heiser argues, and Deuteronomy 4:19 is a great verse to go to here.
What's happening here? In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19 to 20, watch what it says. And lest you lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them, those which Yahweh your God has apportioned for all the peoples under the whole heaven. But Yahweh has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace from Egypt to be a people for his own inheritance as today. Wait a second. I thought Elion gave this to Yahweh. Why is it here saying that Yahweh took them upon himself? And why is it here saying that Yahweh has a portion for the people, these other gods that they like? You can have all this. You can have.
Okay, so I want to note a couple things here. So yeah, I think this is a good point, as I said, but there's several stuff here that's going to bite Godlogic in the butt later. So notice here that it's referring to the sun and the moon and the stars, these celestial objects in the sky. It's referring to them as the host of heaven, right? Like these are seen as being actual gods, beings, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them. So there's the idea that they would be, perceived as gods, the fact that they're going to be drawn away and worship them. And then notice here, which Yahweh your God has a portion for all the peoples under the whole earth. So wait, where is this idea that Yahweh has apportioned the sun and the moon and the stars for the other people of the earth, but not for Israel? That doesn't make sense. The Israelites, don't they have access to the sun? Don't they have access to the stars? Well, no. I mean, like, obviously they do, but this is understood when you recognize that this is talking about the gods of the other nations, and the idea there, it's drawing, it's a similar concept of what we see in Deuteronomy 32, which is that the sons of God that are, divided up and get the nations, those are the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven that Yahweh apportioned for all the people. So the sun, moon, and stars, those celestial, objects, that language of celestial objects, that's being used to refer to the gods. And we get it quite clearly there with all the host of heaven. I think that's going to come up later, so we'll come back to that. But the reason I'm pointing this out here is Godlogic is going to, it seems to try to shy away from the fact that celestial objects in the sky had this connection with deity and the host of heaven and things along those lines. I think Godlogic, if I remember correctly, I think he ends up contradicting one of his points here, but we'll see if I remember that correctly. But he's right to point out this language about Yahweh has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace and whatnot. And I think really the main way, so if I remember correctly, Heiser and Dan McClellan have a back and forth about this. I think the way that tries to argue against this, against the argument, like this use of Deuteronomy 4, is to say, well, Deuteronomy 4 came later. I don't think that's justified. Heiser deals with that, but that's how someone would try to argue against it. But yeah, so I think these are all good points that Godlogic's making here. So here's the thing, though, right? So you might say, James, okay, you recognize Godlogic's making good points. Well, why don't you think he's winning the debate? Because the debate isn't about whether or not El and Yahweh are separate gods. Remember, the topic of the debate is there more than one God in the Bible? Now, if El and Yahweh, if they are distinct gods, that would render a loss for Godlogic. So if Abu Noori was right about this would be a defeat for Godlogic, right? However, if Godlogic is right about this doesn't secure a victory for him, because one can affirm that El and Yahweh are the same while also affirming the reality of other gods. Mike Heiser did it. So all of these good points that I'm saying Godlogic is making here, unfortunately, these are red herrings. Unfortunately, this is just, it doesn't help him, right? In the battle of the actual debate topic. Now, I don't think Abu Noori was like 40 chessing this. I think maybe he lucked out that Godlogic spent this much time like addressing stuff that wasn't directly related to the bow down all you gods stuff. I think Noori could have done better to point out the shifting of the debate that Godlogic has done, like I did. But anyways, we'll keep going.
Have these worthless idols. You can have the sun and the stars and the moons or whatever, but Israel is mine. Israel's going to worship the true God. They are going to know the true God. I thought it was Elion, a separate deity, who did that, Abu Noori. So why is it here saying that it's Yahweh who divided the boundaries? It's Yahweh who picked out Israel for himself. You're going to have to explain that in our cross-examination when I stir you up. So here it is again. Watch this, guys. Isaiah chapter 10, verse 13. He said, "For he has said, by the power of my hand and by my wisdom, I did this. For I have understanding, for I removed the boundaries of the peoples and plundered their treasures." Wait a second. I thought it was just Elion who separated the boundaries of the peoples. In Deuteronomy 32, the Most High, it says that. But here it's saying that Yahweh is the one who did that. Why? Because Yahweh and Elion are one in the same being. They're one and the same. Now, when we look at this, I already showed you guys. Genesis chapter 14, verse 22. It literally says that Yahweh is Elion, the Most High. Right? Let me see. Let me get the put that up for you guys really quick. Boom, boom. Here it is. Yahweh is Elion, the Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth. Psalm 97. For you are Yahweh, Elion, over all the earth. Where are we getting confused here? The Bible is explicit that Yahweh is Elion. Yahweh is the Most High. So stop with this goofy argument that you're saying. Like, you're talking about goofiness. This is goofy. Beyond, there's levels to this.
I do agree this was a horrible mistake on Nori's part. Like, he should not have devoted this much. Like, Nori butchered his opening. He spent so first off, most of Nori's opening had to do with textual dependence upon the Old Testament and like other stuff, which it isn't even like he put that out there, and then he's not even drawing upon that for this. So he really messed that up. That was all wasted time on his part. All the stuff that he's doing here, not only do I agree with Godlogic that they're the same, person, or the same God, like El and Yahweh aren't distinct. It's just eaten up a ton of Abu Noori's time, and I think Godlogic's right on that. So this is strategically, Nori's blundered really huge here.
There's levels to this. Stop this. Stop it with this nonsense. Now, when it comes to Psalm 82, again, Psalm 82, the fallen element.
Y'all, I was just saying good stuff about Godlogic. I sense I don't quite remember everything that he said here, but I sense that I'm about to turn the heat back onto Godlogic.
Elohim, the fallen angels, the fallen Elohim, who are still identified as the sons of God, still identified as the sons of God, who rebelled against him, who went against God, who judge unrighteously, who are unrighteous. And Yahweh judges them.
Hey, what else were they called? You said they were identified as sons of God. What else were they called? What else were they identified as, Godlogic? Oh, that's right. I said you are gods. Interesting that you just keep skipping over that.
So what? Nowhere in Psalm 82 does it ever say that they are God by nature.
There it is. Again, yeah, they say they're gods, but they're not God by nature. This is just a continual shifting the goalpost fallacy. So it's again, I know I'm repeating myself. I'm just going to keep pointing this out. He just keeps shifting the goalpost. I was like, yeah, you showed they were gods, but they're not gods by nature. And then the intuitive response is, what do you mean gods by nature? And what we know is going on in Godlogic's mind is God is a God by nature if it has certain attributes, and those attributes are being uncaused, eternal, like the sovereign king of all the stuff like that. I forget which ones, but it's like that general idea. So what he's saying is they're gods, but they're not gods who have these specific properties that only Yahweh has. But that's not the debate topic. I'm just going to keep reinforcing that. And again, he's drawing on his misunderstanding of Galatians 4 by using this language of not gods by nature. So this is why I have to say that as horrible of a job as Nori's doing, Nori, this is embarrassing on your part. Somehow, Godlogic, I think, manages to do worse. Because at least Nori's, even though I think Nori does very poorly, he is at least engaging with the prompt. Like if what Nori said is true, then at least it would reflect whether or not his position regarding the prompt. Is there more than one God? But with Godlogic, if we just say, okay, there are no other gods by nature, right? Where nature is a set of properties, that doesn't settle the debate prompt. So Godlogic is just, this whole thing is so embarrassing.
That they are the creator, that they are the uncaused cause, that they are.
There it is. Everyone catch that? We're gonna go back and listen to it again.
Them. So what? Nowhere in Psalm 82 does it ever say that they are God by nature. That they are the creator, that they are the uncaused cause, that they are everlasting.
See, that's what he's using God by nature to mean. So anytime we hear Godlogic say they're not God by nature, what he means is they're not all that stuff he just listed out. But in the ancient world, you did not have to have those properties to be considered a god. The debate topic is not, is there more than one god who has those properties? So he's given up the game. He's made it clear here that he is, if you're really paying attention, and I'm curious if anyone who's watching this, like this video review, I'm curious how many people caught that he shifted the debate topic here.
Never does it say that in Psalm 82. And so when it says here that that God, which you admitted here, you admitted that the God who is inheriting the nations, is Elyon, the Most High. You acknowledge that. My question to you would be, who in the world is Elyon getting the nations from? Since he's inheriting the nations, who's giving him who's giving the Most High the nations? Who's giving that to him? Because he's inheriting the nations. What do we see, ladies and gentlemen? We see that Jesus is the Most High who sits enthroned next to the Majesty. And the Majesty says, thank you. And the Lord says the Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool, and ask of me, and I will give you the inheritance of the nations. I will make the nations yours. That's Psalm 110. So Abu Noori, thank you so much for proving the Trinity is the one true God, the only God who exists, while every other Elohim that is identified as an Elohim is a demon, a non-existent God, an idol, and a worthless imagination of mankind.
Okay, so I remember the first time I heard this when I was listening to this debate. I was like, where does this Trinity stuff come from? I don't want people to get the wrong idea. I affirm the deity of Christ. I wrote a book about it, right? Like, yeah, I affirm the deity of Christ. But like that the idea that like he just can, like, the idea that something that Godlogic just argued somehow supports the Trinity. Like, what are you smoking, man? Like, what are you talking about? Nothing that you just said supports the Trinity. In fact, I would say that I don't even think anything you just said even supports the deity of Christ. Like, at best, you would have the idea that Christ is exalted and that Yahweh or Elyon, who, whatever, that they give Jesus the nations, right? But like none of that is like, that doesn't conclude what you just said. Like I was so, when I first heard this, I was like, what? And even hearing it now, I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, not only is this off topic, not only is this like not the debate, like that just doesn't follow from what you said. And so this is just Godlogic being sloppy.
What are we doing, man?
I agree. What are we doing? What are we doing, Godlogic? You're supposed to be the people's champ. You are supposed to be the final boss of Islamic apologetics, right? You are the one that it gets like, sprouted around. You get all the views. You've got like 500,000 people, who are subscribed to you. You do all these big debates. You just did your debate with Mohammed Hijab. You just like, you have these call-in streams, and your rhetoric is this poor. Like your ability to stay on prompt is this poor. What are we doing here, man?
Rest of my time.
All right, now it is time for what everyone has been waiting for. Cross-examination. We got 10 minutes apiece. We're going to go ahead and let me go ahead and swap y'all out. We're going to go ahead and We're going to go ahead and give it over to Noori for 10 minutes. 10-minute cross starts. Please try to keep me out of it as much as you can. All right, now go ahead.
Quick question. Oh, pause time. Quick question.
You got it. What's up?
All right, so we got 10 minutes. So I ask a question, yes or no question. He answers yes or no. How long is he allowed to respond for, and does that come out of my time?
If we do get caught up on that, we'll try to cut that down to about anywhere from 20 to 30 seconds. So, because it's 10 minutes, so we don't want time ate up.
No problem.
All right. If there's anything that needs to be clarified, I will pause the time. If there's any jumbling, I will pause the time.
All
right, here we go. As soon as you start talking.
I'm so glad you've buried yourself. Mr. Logic, Elyon is Yahweh. Elyon is Yahweh. Who are the Beneo Elohim that inherit the nations, Mr. Logic?
Okay, so this is better. We're starting to get back on topic a bit. Who are the B'nai Elohim? Okay, who are the sons of God?
Those are the sons of God. Those would be the fallen angels that God allotted areas of property or territory to.
Oh, so your God of God has allotted and made sovereign devils?
Well, so what I just said is that he's given reign or allowed allotment of the sons of God to rule, to judge. They have their territories, and so that's what the scripture is teaching. They're not gods by nature.
Okay, so I'm just gonna pause. So this is a poor line of this is a poor line of argument that Abu Noori has like started to float into, because it seems like he wants to be pressing like an incoherence of like, oh, why would your God, allot, fallen angels? Why would he allot evil beings go and so on and so forth? But like, even if Godlogic was like, yeah, God did that, it was silly, it's ridiculous, that wouldn't be directly relevant to the prompt about whether or not these beings are gods. So what Noy should have done here is he should have took logic to Psalm 82, where these sons of God are explicitly referred to as gods, or he could have drawn on material from the ancient Near East, where the sons of God were clearly depicted as deities, and such as like the Canaanite pantheon and so on and so forth. So,
all right. So real fast, just to quickly let's quickly deal with they're not gods by nature. The Dead Sea Scrolls 4Q4031I 30 through 46. This is this right here would be
What verse?
45 and 46. You want it again?
With the chapter and verse.
This is the Dead Sea Scrolls, sir.
I know, but like, what's the chapter and verse?
It's called the Psalms. It's called the Psalms. The songs of the Sabbath. That's the chapter and verse.
So is that like quoting? Is that Deuteronomy? Is that what is it quoting?
This is going to be in Psalms.
Which psalm?
It's not in your Psalms. That's the issue.
Oh, okay. So it's a psalm, but it's not a.
Yeah, it's one of the things that was. Yeah, I hope my time is paused. It's one of the things that your. It's one of the things that your Masoretic authors have reducted from your Bible.
My Masoretic authors is amazing.
Yeah, but it's still present in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
All right, can we get a clarification so I can continue the time?
Oh, you can continue. That's.
All right.
Go ahead.
So, I'm giving the source. So the source is 4Q4031I 30 through 46. The spirits of the Holy of Holies, plural. The living gods, plural. The spirits of eternal holiness, plural. Is that dealing with essence, Mr. Logic?
Oh, it seems like because the authors of the Dead Sea Scroll were monotheists. They believed in one true God by nature. And so
again, one true God by nature. Just for you, those of you who know, Mike Heiser has some work out about divine plurality in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And Heiser, if I remember correctly, he directly appeals to divine plurality in the Dead Sea Scrolls to combat the idea that that Israelite religion evolved from polytheism to monotheism, because he points out, like, listen, this stuff that you're saying is evidence of polytheism in the Old Testament. He's saying that stuff still is there in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is supposedly after the time that the Israelite had this type of evolution from monotheism to polytheism. It's supposed to be after they've already changed their views, and so that's kind of part of his argument. So check out Heiser's stuff if you're interested about divine plurality in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I don't think this is a strong argument on Nori's point.
This isn't alien language that we see, because we see throughout, even in the Dead Sea Scrolls in Isaiah, for example, we see that Yahweh is identified as the husbands, plural, of Israel. We see that in Genesis, God says, "Let us make man in our image." So you see a plurality with the one God. So there's no problem there.
It says the living gods. So do you affirm multiple gods?
What's the word there?
It says the living gods.
Yeah, what's the word in Hebrew? It's Elohim, right? Exactly.
Yes.
So it's the same thing
here. The issue here is that it's not Elohim in a singular sense. It's Elohim as a plural sense.
How do you know that?
Because your scholars right here that I have, Michael Heiser says, "Would you like me to read his article?"
You can do whatever you want. It's your time.
Okay. So let's talk about it real fast. So let's deal with the Psalms. Let me scroll down. So everybody, he quoted Michael Heiser a moment ago. Let's see what Michael Heiser says here. So it says, while there is no question that the occurrence of Elohim in verse 1 refers to the Elohimistic pastoral of Yahweh, and that most scholars assume that that God is Yahweh, that is presiding over the council. Yahweh is actually just one of the assembled gods under the presiding El or Elyon. Parker supports the conclusion by arguing that noting that the verb here to stand in 21 denotes prosecution, not presiding in legal context. Psalms 82 then depicts the high god El presiding over an assembly of his sons. Yahweh, one of those sons, accuses the others of injustice. His role is prosecutional, not that of judge. That role belongs to El. The fact that El is standing here means that he is not the presiding deity, alerts us to Yahweh's inferior status. When we go down here, when we see, oh, let's
Okay, so just so everyone's aware, this is a blatant misrepresentation of Michael Heiser. So this is Nori just butchered this. Okay, so the question was about something in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm not gonna like go into depth about like the Dead Sea Scrolls stuff. There's like some nuance there. I'm just gonna reference people to Heiser. So like it seems like he was referencing something from the Dead Sea Scrolls other than Psalm 82. I don't remember the specific thing, chapter and verse or whatever that he referenced, but he was referencing something other than Psalm 82. And then Godlogic was asking him about the meaning of that verse, whether or not it was referring to plural or singular, about, is it plural Elohim or is it just referring to Yahweh, whatever. And then he switches to quoting something from, I'm pretty sure, Heiser's dissertation that's about Psalm 82. So now we're not even talking about the verse in question that Godlogic was asking about. So he switched to a separate verse. And I'm pretty sure this comes from Heiser's dissertation because I'm pretty sure I remember this. The section that Heiser is talking about there, Heiser is there representing the view that he's arguing against. Heiser argues against the idea that in Psalm 82, El and Yahweh are two distinct deities. So Heiser, because he's a scholar, he's representing and he's describing the view of the popular scholarly position about this passage. And then he is, after outlining it, he attacks it. So it seems like Nori, being so completely incompetent at research, he just goes through Heiser. He finds this. It seems like he doesn't take the time to realize, to just read the context and see that Heiser is like representing the position he's attacking. And then he just, I mean, this is embarrassing on Nori's part. It is so embarrassing on Nori's part. But still, because Nori did technically reference some things about there being other gods, I still think I have to give him, I still have to say I think he's winning here, even though he's doing so poorly.
see where he would just quote him verbatim. Matter of fact, I don't want to waste all my time with that. So I'll give you the reference. The reference is Liberty University are Yahweh and El distinct deities in Deuteronomy 32 and Psalms 82. He says here that the language, the grammar that's used here is different when it's used for a plural or a singular.
He doesn't necessarily say that. Now, let me just quote back to you, Michael Heiser. He says, there was a good deal of theological diversity, including polytheism, living hither and yon in the deserts and hill country among Israel, but not with respect to the biblical writers. So Michael Heiser is clear that the biblical writers were not polytheists. They did not believe that there were other gods by nature.
No, how does he define polytheism, Godlogic? So here I'm going to read from one of Heiser's papers. This is titled Monotheism and the Language of Divine Plurality in the Hebrew Bible and the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is going to directly address the topic of how Heiser viewed polytheism. So this is starting around page 87. Scholars of the Hebrew Bible have long known that Israelite religion included a belief in a divine assembly or council under Yahweh. Since this is a well-known feature of the ancient Near East polytheistic religion, it is assumed by most scholars that the presence of the divine assembly is evidence of polytheism in Israel's religion. But there is much more to polytheism than divine plurality language. Polytheism is a system of belief that of necessity includes a range of concepts that are lacking in the religious conceptions of the biblical writers. After noting the recency 17th century of words like monotheism and polytheism, John Osman outlines the crucial elements necessary in defining polytheism. 1. A cooperative cosmology, more than one deity creates and maintains the world. 2. A diversified, politicized cultus, important deities are worshipped in multiple locations, especially urban centers. 3. Mythic, interactive biography, gods are known in relation to other gods. And then he quotes a big section from that scholar. And so then he notes that regarding some of these distinctions, that this distinction is important in two respects for the subject matter of this paper. It recognizes the ontological element in the religion of the biblical writers who were concerned with what God is not. Yahweh is unlike all other gods, he's unique, and how God should not be worshipped. these observations help frame the ensuing discussion in two ways. First, divine plurality language in the Hebrew Bible and later is not an adequate litmus test for polytheism. Polytheistic religion demands the system elements described by Osman. Second, divine plurality language must not impinge on the two primary concerns for the biblical writers in later Judaism: the uniqueness of Yahweh and the role of worship of Yahweh. So why do I pull this up? Because Heiser, when he talks about how the Israelites weren't polytheistic, he isn't just, if Heiser says the Israelites are not polytheistic, he isn't saying the Israelites don't believe in any other gods. Like that's just not what he's referring to. If he says they weren't polytheistic, he's using this in a more nuanced way to refer to the system of beliefs that I just referenced. Now, regarding whether or not Michael Heiser would say that these beings are gods by nature, tell you what, everyone, let's just read from Michael Heiser's classic, very influential book, The Unseen Realm. So this is on page 158. So here he's talking about some stuff regarding Revelation. He says, star language speaks of divinity or glorification elsewhere. In Revelation, Jesus himself, the morning star, and angels are identified with star language to denote their divine, non-earthly nature. So according to Heiser, angels, what type of nature do they have? They have a divine, non-earthly nature. So they are what, everybody? They're gods. He goes on to say, as Daniel says, the righteous will shine like the brightness of the sky above, like the stars forever and ever. Our inheritance of the nations with Jesus at the end of days is in a glorified, resurrected, divine state. The star language of Genesis 15 has an eschatological correlation. So Heiser has no problem with saying that the sons of God have a divine nature. Heiser has no problem saying that we are going to have a divine nature, and the biblical authors, Peter, has no problem with saying we're going to partake in the divine nature, because unlike Godlogic, who has no clue what he's talking about, Heiser understood that the divine nature in the biblical world, it is not referring to this collection of omni properties or this collection of Yahweh unique properties. It was used more broadly than that. You could say that the sons of God had a divine nature. They are divine beings, and Heiser he repeatedly refers to these type of beings as divine beings, and he refers to this as divine plurality. You could recognize that while still saying Yahweh is species unique. So just as Noori went through Heiser and cherry-picked what sounded like it would help him without paying attention to context, so also Godlogic has gone through and cherry-picked Heiser to find things that he hopes will help him without taking into account Heiser's broader corpus of work.
Other spiritual beings that preside with your God as his council?
Yep.
So your council has a council of gods, just not by nature, that are gods over nations.
They're not God by nature. Judge it.
Okay, so we'll let him figure this out.
What is God by nature?
Okay, so notice he said they were spirit beings. He said that he seems like he acknowledged they have authority. So they're presiding, with Yahweh. Even if they're under Yahweh, they're presiding with Yahweh. They have some type of authority. According to the definition that Noori gave at the beginning, Godlogic has admitted that there's multiple gods. Because remember, whether or not they're a god by nature, and he's defined it with that set of terms, that wasn't the debate topic. If a god is defined as a spiritual being who has a bunch of power or authority or so on and so forth, oftentimes worship, that definition that Noori gave at the beginning, and Godlogic is admitting that these sons of God are spiritual beings who they have this authority. I don't think anyone's going to deny that they are worship. That's kind of the whole point of some of this language that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians about like you're offering to things that are demons, and then stuff in Deuteronomy 32 about how they go and they're the shadim that are not God, things like that. So they're clearly worshipped. They clearly have authority. They're clearly spiritual beings. They clearly have power. According to the definition that Noori gave, they are a god. And if Godlogic says, but they're not God by nature in the sense that they don't have they're not uncreated, cool. That's not the debate topic, Godlogic. I know I've said this before. I'm going to keep repeating it. Godlogic is dodging the debate topic. Noori is a very bad debater. He doesn't catch Godlogic on that. He wastes a lot of his time. Like if Godlogic was up against someone competent here who was able to call him out on changing the debate topic, this could have gone a lot differently. So if you're Noori and you're watching this, you did horrible. I'm just be honest. Like Noori just isn't catching what he's doing here.
We've defined what a god is already.
Sure. God by nature is, according to the Bible, the one true God, the one who created the heavens and the earth. Jeremiah says this. But Yahweh is the true God. He is the living God and everlasting King. Thus you shall say to them, the gods that did not make the heavens and the earth will perish from the earth and from under the heavens. So the true God by nature is the creator of all things.
Okay, so when he says there's not more than one God by nature, he's saying there's not more than one God who is the creator of all things. We'll keep it spiffy and somewhere at that, right? Everyone look up here, right? Like, or look at the name of the debate. The debate is, I'm going to read to you the title of this video. Debate: is there more than one God in the Bible? Godlogic versus Abu Noori. It does not say, is there more than one, all creator God in the Bible. It says, is there more than one God? And if you're going to say that in this belief system that they were not, actually gods by nature, then you're going to have to say the ancient Greeks didn't think Zeus and Ares and Aphrodite and all of their gods were God by nature either, which he's going to contradict himself on later. He's actually going to blatantly contradict what he just said here. That's clearly wrong. In the ancient world, beings could be viewed as gods even if they didn't fit this description of being the creator God that he just described.
Right, so Dead Sea Scrolls 4Q4031I, the prince of the wondrous priesthoods, praise the God of gods among all the gods of holiness. There is no distinction made between these gods. These gods sit to the right and the left of your God. They're sitting here in a council with your God. And let's read another. Let's read real fast.
Do you have a question in regards to that, or can I respond to what you just brought up?
I'm sure that's fine. Yeah, I do have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead and ask your question because we're gonna have open dialogue. So you can ask a question based on that if you want.
A matter of fact, I'll save it for the open dialogue. You're right. Why does your scripture quote verbatim a polytheist Ugaritic text?
Oh my gosh, Abu Noori, this isn't helping. Okay, so at this point, no matter how Godlogic answers this, Godlogic could respond to this and say, you know what? You got me. I don't know. That sure is problematic. I'm going to have to go rethink my thing. If Godlogic said that, still wouldn't help. Still wouldn't help Abu Noori when it comes to debating the prompt. Because the prompt isn't about whether or not the Old Testament drew from other literary sources. This is a worthless waste of time from Abu Noori's part. Like, why are you doing this?
Can you show me where?
You already showed you, but I can go back to it for you. No problem. Pause my time, please.
We got 5 minutes left.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so
one
yeah,
second.
so here we go. So
your time is paused. I got you. So yeah, he's right. We do have a 20-minute opening. So try to fill in the rest of your 5 minutes with questions.
I got you. All right, so no problem. So here we go. So Isaiah 27:1, Psalms 74:13 and 14 are quoted directly from KTU 1.5 of the Ugaritic script verbatim. Why?
You didn't. You just said.
I already read it. I already read it to you. You just didn't deal with it, but I'll read it again for you. In that day, Yahweh will punish Leviathan. The Ugaritic word would be Lotan. The Leviathan, the fleeing serpent. Leviathan, the twisting serpent. KTU 1.5 from this pagan Ugaritic text says, when you smite Lotan, the fleeing serpent, finishing off the twisting serpent, the tyrant with 7 heads. Psalm 74, verse 14, crushing the heads of the 7 heads of the Leviathan. Why is this a direct one-for-one quote from this polytheistic text?
It doesn't necessarily sound like a one-for-one quote to me, but I see a lot of similarities there. And it would be interesting, like if you were to say, like you have the pagan Arabs who use the term Allah for, and to be the father of, goddesses and deities. And then Islam comes later and then uses Allah as their one God, their one deity. And so would you say that
it's pagan, my turn to ask.
I know I'm not asking a real question. It's rhetorical. I'm saying
it's not your turn to ask rhetorical questions, man.
I can ask a rhetorical question because it's not a real question for you to answer. It's rhetorical.
Well, hold on, wait. I got it. Yeah,
it's a cross exam, man.
Hold on.
I
got it, guys. Look, if that is a part of his response and it doesn't need an answer, you definitely don't have to answer it.
Exactly.
He can say it because he's not prompting you to answer the question. So you can also do the same thing on yours too.
Are you pausing my time for these runoffs?
It's paused right here because we got jumbled up.
Now, sure. if he's gonna give us a whole display, then I need my time.
No, it was part of his.
I feel like Noori is a pretty bad sport. So both of them are bad sports throughout this. I feel like Noori is just like a bad sport. There's several times he seems to be like really what's the word? We'll say pedantic about like the time and whatnot. And don't get me wrong, like the time is important in a debate. Um, but like this is just yeah, this is silly. I don't know why. I mean, like so, Godlogic like he was doing a comparison. He was explaining the concept. He was making comparison. Like this seems fine to me. I feel like Nori is just complaining over nothing here.
Rebuttal. That was within his 20 to
You
30
asked
seconds.
me a
And that
question.
Islam is not the. He's talking about Islam. That's not the conversation. How is that relevant to my time?
No, he was given like a thought provoking.
I also think it's interesting that Nori's like, oh, Islam, that's not the conversation. Okay, and like literary influence of the Old Testament, like that's more on topic for the debate. What?
Response. It doesn't. You don't have to respond to that, but that was part of his response to what he's saying. He's trying to make a connection.
That's fine. Go
Yeah.
ahead, man.
Thank you.
Okay. So go ahead.
All right. So like I said, like I, like so let me just
I
not
don't.
put it in the form of a rhetorical question since that's confusing. You wouldn't say that the Quran is now quoting the pagan literature when the Quran refers to Allah as God, just like when the pagans before referred to Allah as God. You wouldn't say that. So I think that you should have the same consistency here. Number one. Number two, this is beautiful because even if we see same similar concepts within ancient Middle Eastern theology, we see similar concepts. That doesn't mean that there's a copy or there's a direct quote or it's stealing from. What we do see though is how the biblical authors engage with the polytheistic and pagan theologies of the Gentiles around them, and they demonstrate that Yahweh is the true God over what they call gods, over who they think is mighty. And the biblical authors place Yahweh as mighty over them. That's what you're seeing a display here in the Bible.
Quick question: is my pause time for all of this, bro?
No, that was my answer.
Bro, it took 2 minutes to answer out of my time, man.
That wasn't 2 minutes. It was longer when you interrupted.
Hey, what's up, host?
Oh my gosh, this
Or
is
not host, but mod.
just such a bad sport.
What, bro? I'm helping you out with the time, bro. Anything that you need, I got you. I'm paying attention to how.
Like generally, like in a debate, if you're given 15 minutes for your cross exam, the time where the other person is answering the question, that does count towards your like 15 minutes. So like you can't get upset about that. And you can generally in a debate, or like I mean, this is my view. Like if you feel like they're rambling on and not answering, you can be like, I'm reclaiming my time, and you can get them back on. Like that's normal. So like I Abu Noori is just like just whining here incessantly for no reason. I just like grow up. I mean, grow up is something I'm gonna say to both of them here in a bit, but this right here is just I feel like awkward.
Long the answer and the responses are. You think I'm gonna cut you off directly at 10 minutes? I'm paying attention to what's going on, bro, but I want him to flush out the answer. If you didn't want him to go that long, you could have jumped in and I would have came in.
Exactly. Like Abu Noori during a cross exam, he can jump in and be like, no, like he can cut him off.
But I'm not gonna cut his answer if you're listening to it get flushed out.
Yeah, I did that a second ago, but it's all good, no problem. So are you saying that Yahweh and Baal just happened to fight the same exact seven-headed monster, the same name, the same adjectives? Did Isaiah copy the homework of the pagans, or what is this? Why is it that it's a word for word lexiconal match? Oh yeah, excuse me. And I can refer you to Dr. Aaron Wilson Wright's 2002 publication of the Vetus Testamentus that proves that the Ugaritic text in Isaiah 27:1 are reflexes of the same exact proto-northwestern Semitic formula. And then it even lists out the words. It's not a quick, and I quote, "This is not a coincidence. This is direct textual inheritance." Why is there direct textual inheritance from this pagan text in your book?
So you see how long it took you to ask the question? Don't complain.
Again, I'm just gonna kind of like we can say the same thing with the Quran. Like this is none of this is relevant to the debate, but we can talk about like why it is in the Quran. You have it drawing on stories from the apocalypse of Abraham. We can talk about why the Quran draws on stuff from the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas. Yeah, like if you really want to play this, like, oh, you're influenced by other text game, like we can do that. We can do that as well. But none of this is related to the text. None of this is related to the debate in question. And Nori's a horrible debater.
When I give you a flushed out answer. So number one, Again, reflexes is not copying or direct quotation. But again, it sounds like you didn't hear my answer to you. What you see in the Bible with the biblical authors is you see them engaging with the polytheistic or pagan theology with the Gentiles around them, and they are demonstrating that what they are attributing to, let's say, their god Bel or Amun Ra, for example, these qualities that you're attributing to these false gods, these false deities, are truly attributes of Yahweh, the true God, the living God, the one who created the heavens and the earth. Baal is nothing. Ra is nothing. They're nothing. These gods and idols are nothing, as the scriptures clearly state. So what they do is they attribute those qualities that they apply to their false gods, attribute it to the true God, who is truly mighty over Baal, who is truly mighty over the Leviathan, who is truly mighty over all the gods of Egypt, which is why you'll see these tropes.
Next question. Habakkuk chapter 3 verse 5 describes Yahweh marching to war. It says in English, pestilence went before him and plague went before his feet. The Hebrew words are Debor and Resheph. Resheph and Debor are two gods from the from the Canaanite Ugaritic text. They have their own epic. Your Bible names them verbatim and says that they marched forth before your God. It says, let's read it one more time.
What's your question?
You gotta put a question. You gotta put a question on that.
Yeah, I got you. So pestilence went forth before him, and plague went forth before him. So my question is, do you deny that this verse has two pagan deities marching forth before your God?
I deny that. Yes. So what you see again, Abu Noori, your problem is word correlation, because the word is being used for these pagan gods in another religion, when the Bible uses the same, because they have the same language and the same sister language, because the Bible uses these words, therefore it's referring to pagan gods. No, again, at best, this is what you have, Abu Noori. At best, what you have is yet again the biblical authors demonstrating that these are not gods within themselves, but these would be agents of Yahweh, who he sends out and works and ministers for him to accomplish his purposes. That they're
So I'll say I don't have a whole lot to say about this. Mike Heiser has a paper where he talks briefly about this passage that Abu Noori is referencing. It is referencing pagan deities. I think that's very clear. And there is Heiser has a paper where he talks about this in a connection with a psalm that's interesting. I'll put that up on screen. I don't think Godlogic is. You can't just handwave this away. Like, this is clearly referring to deities. If there are deities that are known by these names in this world, and those like names are being used in a way that is clearly like they're associated, like they're being represented as gods here, which I think they are. You can't just hand wave that away and be like, like that, just a word association. Like, no, like this seems to be like depicting those deities as being going before Yahweh, or coming at his heels or something like that. But I do think Godlogic is right to say that these are instances where these beings are being depicted as being lesser than or subservient to or under the authority or control of Yahweh. So I won't say a whole bunch more on that, other than just check out that thing by Michael Heiser, because it's really interesting.
All right, that's time for that cross. We're gonna swap out, and then we can head into the open so y'all can really flesh this out.
That's time for the cross. That's crazy.
My brother, you ate up a lot of your time making statements, not asking.
Nah, man. Hey, look, y'all go pencil with me. It's all good, man. It ain't gonna help you. Let's do it.
All right, man. Go ahead, bro. Logic, you got it. 10 minutes.
all right. What does it mean to be true God?
It has no meaning. That's something that Christianity makes up.
I just want to briefly read a passage from the Quran. This is not one that Godlogic goes to. I don't know. I mean, like, listen, sometimes in the moment you don't think of things, and I'm not bashing him for not using this. This is from the Quran, Surah 6, verse 3. He is the only true God in the heavens and the earth. He knows whatever you conceal and whatever you reveal, and knows whatever you do. That's going to be very interesting in light of the game that Abu Noori is about to try to play with Godlogic here. Now, I will say not all translations of that Quran verse render it that way, but a good portion do. So I think Godlogic's going to press him on this in a way that's decent and appropriate, although Okay, so like, let's talk briefly about what it means to be like a true God. If somebody says, so let's, one day I was driving my car in my hometown and I saw a billboard that said something like, real men love babies. I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty. Or imagine you see someone say, real women have curves. How do we understand those statements, right? I think the idea there is similar when it says it's the only true God, right? Or something along those lines. The idea there is to say that in the case of what's a real man or a real woman or whatever, and I don't endorse that type of language either way. The idea there is to say that a person most properly or most fully exemplifies the kind of prototypical picture of a man or a woman or a god. So in the case of, let's talk about men for a second. Say a real man loves baby, or oh, a real man, he doesn't cry, or a real man does X, Y, Z, right? The idea there, the underlying logic that's going with that is that a real man, what they mean by that is that the person in question who fits what it means to be the real man is that the person is the fullest the fullest representative of what it means to be a man. Or it's the idea that they are the type of being, the type of person who can most properly have that language used to them. It's like whatever it is you think a prototypical man is, like they're the fullest expression about that. Same thing with the woman stuff, right? So if we're talking about what does it mean to be the one true God, I think you can very plausibly understand that to mean Yahweh is the one true God in the sense that he is the one who the language of God most properly refers to. He is the fullest expression of what it means to be a God. So give an example. Yahweh is referred to as the God of gods. So gods are these spiritual beings. They have authority or over different things on the earth, and they're worshipped. But these beings who they have this authority, Yahweh is the God who's over them. Like he's the true God who even has authority over the little gods, right? He's like the fullest expression of what godhood is. I think that's the concept that's on play at when it says one true God language. So that's a question that I think Godlogic. I think for him, one true God just goes back to that set of attributes we've already talked about. But I think the answer I just gave is better.
Oh, so you don't believe that Allah is the true God?
No, I believe Allah is the only God. Your belief doesn't coincide with mine at
Do you
all.
believe he's the true God? Is my question.
I believe he's the only God. There's
I,
only
I,
one
I,
God.
I'll ask it again. Do you believe that Allah is the true God?
Allah says in the Quran, Allah la ilaha illallah. There is no God that exists except Him. So
So
to
is that a
apply the
yes?
word, so to apply the word true to as Allah the true God is kind of incoherent when there is only one God.
It's incoherent. Hold on, bro.
I think this is a decent way for Godlogic to press here. I think maybe Godlogic could have pressed him and gotten a little bit more out of him if he inversed the question and it said, "Is Allah a false god, or are there any false gods? Is Jesus a false god in Christianity?" I think maybe if he inversed it, maybe I'm not saying for sure, right? 'Cause I don't know how Abu Noori would have responded. So if you ask Abu Noori like, "Hey, is Allah a false god?" and he says no, well then I feel like you could have some fun with him. You're like, okay, so if Allah's a god, he's not a false god. It seems to just like he's a true god. Maybe you could have some fun there. I don't know how well it would have worked out. I mean, Abu Noori seemed pretty like stubborn and stiff necked about not wanting to answer that, so he might have just done the same way, even if Avery had flipped it there.
Hold on a second. And you can keep my time running. You do not have to stop me. You do not have to stop the time. It is incoherent to refer to Allah as the true God. Nice.
Take the whole quote.
May 9th.
Take the whole quote.
Oh, that is the whole quote.
That wasn't the whole quote.
May 9th, 2026. Abu Noori. All right. Thank you for that. What does the word true mean?
Something that's true.
You just use the same word in the definition. What does it mean? What does the word mean?
Something that's objectively verifiable.
One, that's a horrible definition of true. Propositions can be true even if they can't be verified, but that's not really relevant for this debate. I just wanted to nitpick it.
Okay, is it objectively verifiable that Allah is God?
Yes.
So would it be appropriate to say that Allah is the true God?
Why would it be necessary to say that he's the true
Is it
God?
appropriate?
Why
I do think Godlogic gets some here. I think that's a good line of argument.
Would it be necessary
You're
to
asking
say
me a question.
why?
Don't ask a question. Please answer.
No. I'm asking a rhetorical question.
No,
Don't
you're
pencil
not.
with me. Don't pencil with me like you just did me a second ago. So why would it be necessary to ask, are you the true father of your son if I'm the only father of my son? That's goofy.
So that's not an answer to the question. Are you the true father of your son?
I don't have a son.
Okay, if you had a son, would you be the true father of your son?
I'm the only father of him.
Would you be the true father of your son? Answer the question, Nori.
That's fine. That's fine.
Thank you. So same thing. Let's now switch the characters. Is Allah the true God?
It's unnecessary to call
I
Allah.
didn't ask if it's unnecessary.
I didn't interrupt
Is he the true God?
Okay, see here, like Godlogic's interrupting, which is fine. You can do this in cross exam. So like what Abu Noori was complaining about earlier, like at least Godlogic understands as a debater. You can interrupt your person if they're wasting your time. So like this is, yeah. It's just...
Didn't interrupt you.
Yeah, you
It was
did.
unnecessary to call him the true God, just like it's unnecessary to call me the true
I didn't ask
father.
if it's necessary.
I didn't interrupt
I'll
you,
ask it
sir.
again. Let me be
Hey,
clear.
Mod, what's going on, man?
Hey, can you make him answer my
Hold
question?
on. So it's nothing bad is actually happening. Nori, you're not willing to answer yes or no to the question. Logic, it is a debate. The audience will see what's happening on both sides. That's just how it goes with the cross. I can't force him to say yes or no. So
Fair
if
enough.
Nori doesn't want to say yes or no, then you got to put him another. You got to give him another question.
Sure, fair enough. We all see how embarrassing it is. He said that it is, you know, irrational or whatever the word it was that he used to refer to Allah as the true God. Anyway, we all saw that. Okay,
So
so
really quick, before we start the timer, I want to
Mhm.
clarify: are we done with that point? Do you want to ask that
yeah,
question?
I'm gonna ask another question since he's scared to answer this one.
Okay. So as soon as you ask the question, we're going to start the timer.
Okay. Are demons gods
No.
by nature?
According to the Bible, and according to the ancient world in which the Bible was written in, demons would have been considered Elohim. They would have been considered deities. They would not have been considered the uncreated creator of all things, but that was not a necessary requirement to be considered an Elohim, to be considered a god, nor is that a requirement in other religious systems. So this is about to go poorly.
No.
Okay. Does the Bible say that the gods of the nations, the surrounding nations, are demons?
The Bible contradicts itself. No, it doesn't necessarily say that because when we read your Bible, we find instances where your Bible says that the devils, I believe in Hebrews 1 verse 5, says that when demons sin, they are cast into hell until the day of judgment with gloomy chains. So these
I know what he's referring to. That's not Hebrews. I think that's Jude or Peter, if I'm not mistaken. So there are scholars, there are Christians who will say that in the Old Testament there are a variety of voices, and that you cannot assume univocality. You cannot assume that each voice is saying something that's necessarily consistent with the other. So if Noe wanted to, a better avenue he could have gone through is he could have said to Godlogic, hey man, listen, you can point to all these scriptures that you think deny, that these are other gods, but those are different writers in different times, and it may be that they're presenting ideas to combat stuff that's contained in earlier scriptures. And there are scholars. I mean, I'm not advocating for this view, but there are scholars who take that position. They would say that there are some ideas that reflected in early scriptures of Israelite thought, and then later ideas combat those. I feel like that's something that if you had a scholar who they were well versed in those arguments, I would be interested to see how Godlogic is going to respond to that, because Godlogic's main thing is to say, well, verse A can't possibly mean, when we see in Psalm 82, when we see that Yahweh says you are gods, that can't possibly mean they're actually gods, because this other thing in Jeremiah. But if you got someone who's like, into these debates, they might say, listen, these are different authors at different times. They reflect different stages of Israelite development. And so that rhetoric isn't going to really fly. Yeah, and I do think this is a weakness in Godlogic's argument, because if somebody went that route, if somebody went the route of said there's multiple voices, they conflict, but some of them affirm the reality of multiple gods, then that would meet the standard for the debate. Yeah. Again, I don't advocate for that view, and Mike Heiser has presented material arguing against the idea that there are that there's this evolution from polytheism to monotheism in Israelite thought, but that is something that is relevant.
Can't be demons. Why are these demons up in heaven kicking it with your God?
Okay, so referring to them as going to heaven doesn't answer the question. All right, this is Deuteronomy 32:17. It says, they sacrificed to demons who are not God, to gods whom they have not known, new gods whom came lately, whom your fathers did not dread. Does the scripture say that the nations that they sacrifice to, these gods they sacrifice to, are actually demons?
Yeah, so we see here that the Israelites, or the author, whoever the author is anonymous. Whoever this author is, he's trying to cope. What's going on is he's already quoted from the Ugaritic text. He's already stolen from their scriptures, and we know historically and academically, we're going to get into this later, that it's known historically that the Israelites were polytheists at first, and they later adopted monotheism. So this is a later attempt at a cleanup.
And I don't care about what Israel believed. We know that they were, we're talking about what the authors of the Bible are believing. So,
Okay, so I mean, Heiser addresses this idea pretty significantly in his work about the evolution from polytheism, monotheism. That's not justified, I don't think, at least not in the way that Abu Noori is depicting it. There's going to be some, qualifications that need to be going with those terms, and I would fight even using those terms in application to Israelite religion because they're recent terms and classifications. But to say that Deuteronomy 32 is a cleanup is very odd, because that's the type of passage that is typically and often gone to as being the earlier stage in that kind of line between polytheism and monotheism. So it's like Abu Noori doesn't even know, like, if he wants to take this theory of, they were polytheists and they were polytheists, if he wants to argue that, like, he's not even arguing that, right? Like, he's not even like presenting that model of Israelite development correctly, because that model, proponents of that model, are very often going to point to Deuteronomy 32 as evidence for the earlier stage where they're polytheists. So, like, saying that this is them coming, like, this just isn't competent. Like, he just doesn't know what's left or right here.
again, does the author say that the nations, the gods, the nations that they said were gods are actually demons? Does he say that? Yes or no, please?
Yes, that is verbatim in the Bible,
Okay.
but we can't take away from the
Thank you.
fact that other places in the Bible show
It's
that
over.
they aren't demons. Thank you.
Gotcha.
Both of them are assuming deities or something, or demons or something, or shadium with the term that's used there, are something that aren't gods, but they would have been. Mike Heiser, someone both of them quote, affirms that they would be seen as deities in that culture. So this is just bad argument.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. In Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 11, it says, has a nation changed gods though they were not gods? According to Jeremiah, were the gods of the nations actual gods?
I would say, according to Jeremiah, no. According to Isaiah, yes.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So
Listen, I do want to be clear. That's not something that Godlogic deals with. So, like, somebody may take the position, like a scholar may take the position that, like, there are some voices in the Bible that affirm divine plurality, and there are some voices in the Bible that don't. And if you just go to one voice that doesn't, that's not going to change the fact that there are voices that do, if somebody takes that position. Now, I've already explained why I don't think that Jeremiah passage means what Godlogic thinks it does. But, like, Abu Noori doesn't need to show that there are no voices in the Bible which deny the reality of other gods. Like, that's not his burden. You could have voices in the Bible that say exactly what Godlogic wants them to be saying, which there's no gods that exist. So long as there are at least some voices in the Bible that say the opposite, the debate prompt would be the case that there's more than one God in the Bible. So that is, Avery's chuckling here. I don't think he's grappling with the seriousness of that issue here.
man, a lot of concessions here. Is Yahweh identified as Elion?
Yes.
So in Deuteronomy 32, since Yahweh is Elion, then therefore Yahweh is the one who divided the nations, correct?
Incorrect. Being identified as something, being called something, doesn't make the thing true.
This is incoherent as a response. What in the world are you talking about, Nori?
In the Ugaritic text that Elyon is the father deity of the Canaanite pantheon. This is where you get this idea from in your Bible. So to later try to take it and readapt the story to make Yahweh this weird foreign god who comes from down south, and we'll prove that later, Elyon is just once again a cleanup attempt later.
Do you have any ancient text that depicts Yahweh as a god within a pantheon?
We have ancient texts that depict God as a non-Canaanite. Excuse me, that depict Yahweh as a non-Canaanite God. He's a god from down south. He's a Midianite god of the Shazu people.
Not what I asked. I'll ask it again. If just say you don't have it so that you can take it, okay? Do you have any ancient texts that refer to Yahweh as a god amongst the pantheon of gods? Yes or no?
Yes.
All right, can you show it?
Yeah, it's called the Yahu of Shazu.
Can you show us that? Can you show us the ancient manuscript of that? And that is referring to Yahweh as a pantheon, a god within a pantheon.
It refers to him as a pagan deity amongst other gods.
Yeah, show us that it refers to Yahweh as a god within a pantheon of gods, and show us that
To
it's
try
the
to
ancient text.
try to specify it to a hold on. To try to specify it to a pantheon of gods is fallacious. Because
Did you
once
not?
again, hold on, I'm still answering. Because once again, I just said that Yahweh is not native to the land Canaan, so the pantheon exists in Canaan. Elyon, Baal, these are members of the pantheon. Yahweh is a later addition, so we don't expect to see Yahweh in the written legends about the Canaanite pantheon because he doesn't exist within Canaan. He exists within South Midian, where he's the god of the Shazu people.
Okay, thank you. So you just acknowledged then what you just said was fallacious because it wasn't my words, Abu Noori. You yourself 2 seconds ago said that Yahweh is a god among a pantheon of gods. You
That's how
said
he's
that.
that's how he's depicted in your Bible, sir.
Well, no, you were talking
Yeah.
about before this. You're talking about before the Bible. That's why I asked you, can you demonstrate to me an ancient manuscript, an ancient text that refers to Yahweh and depicts Yahweh as a god in a pantheon of gods? And you just acknowledge you can't show.
So it's gonna so okay. So I mean, I think Nori's doing a bad job here. No surprise. Whether or not you say Yahweh is in a pantheon of gods is going to come down to how you define a pantheon of gods. So if I was to ask you, is El in Canaan? Is El a god in a pantheon of gods? I think most of us would probably say, yeah, right? Like he's the high god presides over them. It's like, okay, in Psalm 82, that is an ancient manuscript, like that's an ancient text. Yahweh is depicted as taking his seat in the midst of the gods. I mean in some sense, Yahweh is a god in a pantheon. Now, as I'm going to agree with Heiser and say that Yahweh is species unique. He's completely exalted above them. He in power and attributes and all that stuff, right? I'm gonna agree with him on that. But that's still, depending on how one defines what it means to be a god in a pantheon, Psalm 82 would meet, I think, potentially the criteria that Godlogic is going for here. And I just don't see Godlogic dealing with Psalm 82 in this debate. Like,
That. You're not. We're not going to find that. So man, stop wasting my time.
I've
You
already
said
said that. I've already said that. Yahweh is a later addition to the Canaanite pantheon, so he's added to the pantheon in your Bible.
Okay. If something is referred to as an Elohim, does that mean that it's God by nature?
okay, so let's interpret that. If something is referred to as an Elohim, does that mean it has the properties of being the uncreated creator of all? That's what he's asking. When he says God by nature, that's what's going on in the background. He's made explicit that's what he means by that term. He's defined it that way multiple times. The answer to this is no, but that's not the debate topic. The debate topic is not how many uncreated creators of all there are. The topic is there more than one God? And Elohim is the term translated as God. It's a term, it's the word translated for God in the Hebrew. When Hebrew gets translated into Greek, it gets translated into theos, which is the Greek word for God. Like, I don't know how much more explicit I can be about this. Like, this is just not the dub he thinks it is.
What do you mean by nature?
That it's the true God, the living God, the everlasting God, creator of heaven and earth.
Okay, there's that definition again. Uncreated, creator of earth, true God, living God, so on and so forth.
Is that the definition of the true God?
Yes, I just answered you again. So now
Yeah, no
answer my
problem. So
question.
so no problem. Human
Okay, so he just affirmed what it means to be the true God. It seems like he just affirmed that that's to be the uncreated creator of all. That's not the debate topic.
beings are called Elohim.
That's not what I asked you. I'll ask it again. Does the word Elohim depict a God by nature just by the word itself?
It can at times, and at times it doesn't.
So by the word itself, it doesn't, but context will tell you what it's referring to. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So again, Psalm 82, In
Here we go.
Psalm 82, the Elohim that God is judging over.
Mhm.
Can you show me in Psalm 82 where they are God by nature, gods by nature, that
He
they
doesn't
actually
need
possess the
to. He does not need to. This is shifting the debate. If they are gods by a reasonable definition, if they are gods by a definition that you guys have agreed to, or through colloquial sense, or through, actually, more importantly, if they are gods in the ancient Israelite understanding, if an ancient Israelite would have looked at them and been like, oh, yeah, that's what we consider a god, then it doesn't matter whether or not they also have the properties of being the uncreated creator of all. That doesn't matter. Because if that's the case, you've lost the debate, Avery. There's more than one God in the Bible. Avery, you're so bad at this. Like everyone, like you get you, and you about to. He's about to get so cocky. This is just simply not the debate topic.
divine essence.
Yeah, what does your God call that council?
Why are you asking me a question?
Oh
No
my
question.
bad. They're called the divine council, right?
Can you show me that they're divine in essence and
Does
not
your
just in
God call
their
them the
not in just their
divine?
role
Does your
because they are
God
part of
call
the
them the
heavenly
divine?
council? Can you?
Okay, so notice what he's doing here. So notice his thing there is like, okay, if somebody's referred to as Elohim, if they're in the divine council, if they're referred to as Elohim, if they're referred to as sons of God, all of which is language in this culture would have referred to as divine beings, and Heiser would refer to them as divine beings, then we can't just infer, oh yeah, those are gods. He's now putting in an additional burden. He's shifting the goalpost and saying, well, show to me that they're God in essence. Well, first off, what do you mean they're God in essence? Second off, why is it Abu Noori's job to show you that they are God in essence? Why is it not your job to show that they are gods not in essence? And then of course you would have to define what the essence is. Now, if he's using essence to mean the same way that he's been using God by nature, that does not matter for the debate topic.
Show me that they're gods by nature.
Yeah, there it is again. Okay, so he's using essence clearly to be synonymous with gods by nature, and I've already addressed that. That's not the debate topic.
Does your God call them the divine
Hold
council?
on, real quick. Hold on, real quick, Nori. If that's not a rhetorical, try to form it in a way where you're just making a statement yourself, and then you can ask that during the 20.
No problem. Your God calls them a divine. So that's the answer.
Does he call them divine in nature or call them the divine council?
He calls them divine council.
Thank you. So, being the divine council doesn't entail the people who's are the beings that's part of the divine council as having divinity within themselves as far as them being true God. Where in Psalm 82 does it depict them as being God by nature? God
And he just, like I said, he uses this as a battering ram the entire debate. God by nature. This phrase he gets from Galatians. He does this the entire debate.
by nature.
Clarifying question. Can you show me nature in the Bible? Because I'm not tracking.
No, that's not a clarifying question. You're playing games. Can you please answer the question? If not, don't answer. Just say you can't.
Okay, and then I answer like this. I haven't seen the word nature in the Bible, so I don't know how to answer this philosophical question.
You haven't?
The word nature, divine nature, no.
Okay. How much time do I have left?
We have 1 minute left.
1 minute left. Man, you are embarrassing yourself, man. This is the Belt Boys champion, y'all. Let me see. 1 minute left. Let's see here. Is there anybody who is like Yahweh, Most High, who sits on high?
Yes, Baal.
Can you show me in the Bible where it says that Baal, where it affirms that Baal is actually like Yahweh who sits on high? Show us that.
Yeah, so I can show you in the Bible where once again it quotes the Ugaritic script word for word, and it takes the Baal imagery where it says Baal is the rider of clouds and attributes it to Yahweh.
So does it attribute it to Baal or Yahweh?
The Ugaritic text to Baal.
The Bible. Does the Bible attribute that to Yahweh or Baal?
No. The Bible copied their homework and attributed it to Yahweh.
Okay, so there's nowhere in the Bible where it says Baal is like Yahweh who sits on high?
No, of course not. What they're doing is,
It's over.
Once again, of course
Thanks for
not.
that,
They're
man.
taking, yeah, no problem. So they're taking things from the Ugaritic text and applying it to Yahweh. So why would we expect to see that in the Bible, sir?
So just so we're all clear here, so as I've already talked about earlier, there are sections in the Bible that talk about Yahweh being exalted above all gods, Baal is one of the gods that Yahweh would be exalted over if Yahweh is exalted over all gods. But then also, I feel like this is pretty clearly cashed out in the conflict between the prophets of Baal and Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 22. Excuse me, that's the combat between the prophets in 1 Kings 18, where that's drawn out, where there's a battle between the prophets of Baal and Elijah, and they're like, all right, we're gonna make 2 offerings. You guys pray to Baal, get him to light your fire. I'll get Yahweh to light my fire. Yahweh wins. The prophets of Baal are destroyed, and then Yahweh, to show that he's the real he's the real authority over the weather. He then sends rain. So, in addition to all the language about Yahweh being exalted above all the gods, you have passages like that where Yahweh is clearly asserting his dominance.
Okay. That is time for the cross-examination.
Okay, for the open discussion.
Now we will do the open 20. All right.
Oh man. So I get to start it off or lead it off, don't I?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, no problem. Yeah, so you're God by nature, so you do admit that there are other gods.
1 second. Start that over. Start that over. I had to switch out the panel.
No
okay,
problem.
go ahead. 1, 2, go.
So you do admit that there are other gods with your God up in heaven that have actual supremacy, sovereignty, sending wrath, etc., right?
No, I do not agree that there are actual gods that have sovereignty, that have power, that are creators. No, there are not actual gods, but these are ministers of Yahweh and agents of Yahweh that he has used and allotted to their particular areas. And so Yahweh is the only one who's sovereign in heaven. And Yahweh is the only one who rules in heaven. And everything else works for him. They're not gods by nature. Yahweh is the one who's called the true God, right? Right?
Okay, so yeah, so you gave us a Bible verse. I want to say it was let me see. Yeah, so I want to say it was 2 Kings 21:3. It was talking about the heavenly host that the people worship. What is that heavenly host?
You didn't hear my answer to you before?
You did answer this question. What is this heavenly host? Are you gonna say this heavenly host? Or are you gonna, or was it the demon?
Which passage are you talking about?
There's a few of them that say it. We can use 2 Kings 21:3.
Okay, so Second Kings.
Either
21.
2 Kings 21:3 or 2 Kings 17:16. Either one.
Let's go. And he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, according to the despicable practices of the nations, whom Yahweh drove out before the people of Israel. For he rebuilt the high places that Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and erected altars for Baal, and made an Asherah, as Ahab king of Israel had done, and worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. Yeah, so the host of, it depends on what this is talking about. It looks like the host of heaven can be the sun, the moon, the stars. Like, for example, we have over here in Deuteronomy 4. Watch what it says here. And lest you lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them, those which Yahweh your God has apportioned for all the peoples under the whole heaven. So it could be referring to the sun, the moon, and the stars, and
It's referring to the sun and moon and stars because those were seen to be deities. Those were members of the host of heaven who were part of the kind of heavenly divine council. And we get this pretty explicitly in other passages in scripture. So this is 1 Kings 22. So let's see, starting in verse 19. So the prophet says, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all of the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. So this is clearly referring to the divine council, heavenly host. Now, I've already talked about in Deuteronomy 4 why it's obvious that that is referring to the heavenly host and not just like physical objects, because it specifically talks about how those things were allotted to the people, but not to Israel. And we know from Deuteronomy 32 that what was allotted to Israel, what was allotted to the people, but not to Israel, was these gods of the other nations, the other sons of God. It is if what is being talked about here is physical objects, it doesn't make any sense for Yahweh to say, "Oh, I've allotted those to the nations, but not to you," because the Israelites have just as much access to the sun as everybody else. Like that's their sun just as much as everybody else. This only really makes sense if you recognize that this is referring to the celestial objects as the host of heaven, because this culture, they viewed them as that. That type of language is something that was used regarding divine beings, and the sons of God are referred to as stars in Job as well. This is all stuff you would know if you actually took the time to properly familiarize yourself with Heiser's work instead of just cherry picking it.
The elements of the universe and the galaxies.
You said that was Deuteronomy what?
Deuteronomy 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19.
Verse 19. Let's go look at that real quick. Let's go look at that in the Hebrew.
Yep.
1 second.
Take your time now. It's a slow cook.
Bro, you conceded that there's other beings up in heaven with your God throwing down lightning, man.
Yeah, and they're not God.
You just don't want to call
They're
them
not
God
gods.
by nature. You're a cook, man.
You concede that they're not God by
The worst
nature.
of it ain't coming, man.
You concede that they're not gods by nature. All of a sudden, you don't know what nature means. You don't know what truth means.
I don't know what all that philo talk is, all that philosophy that's not in your Bible. Like
It's right here in the Bible.
I don't know when Godlogic has cited Philo in this conversation.
No, it's not. You ain't shown me divine essence once. You just made that up, man. You just made that up, man. And they don't have the divine essence. Show me that in the Bible. Well, I can't. Can you show me God throwing lightning bolts? Well, I can, but they don't have the divine essence.
This is tough. Now, in order for Abu Noori, he needs the words divine essence to be shown in the Bible for him to understand what that is. That's amazing.
But wait a second. Why is it okay for you to assume they don't have the divine essence or divine nature or whatever? Why is it okay for you to assume your position as the default Godlogic? Now, again, like Godlogic I think there's an equivocation fallacy going on with Godlogic between nature. So he uses the divine nature when he's asked to define it. He uses that to mean these properties that are associated just with Yahweh, right? Being the uncreated creator of all, so on and so forth. But I sense that at the background, like that it's weird to call that like God by nature. It's weird to call that God by nature because it seems like to say that something has the nature of a God is just to say that this thing exemplifies the properties that are needed for that thing to fall into that classification system. And in the ancient world, like to be by nature a god, like if we were to not use Godlogic's like weird little ad hoc definition here, like if we would look at the ancient world and what's like, what does it mean for one to have the nature of a god? Like if we were to like say, okay, in the ancient world, what do you have to meet that like criteria? It's going to be stuff like being in the spirit realm, being in the spiritual realm, being in some sense like having splendor and light. Deities were often, connected with bright shininess, maybe even being made of light or something like that, or being clothed in it. Having this type of like authority and power, being worshipped, like that is the type of thing that is associated with, what it's like to be a god. If we just mean nature by mean what it's like, that's what it's like to be a god in the Old Testament. Like that's kind of a prototypical depiction, right? And so if you mean God by nature in this loose sense, then like the beings that are being discussed, like they're gods by nature, like that in like a more colloquial sense. The only reason they're not gods by nature is because Godlogic has set up this weird little ad hoc definition where a god by nature is just Yahweh properties. Like it's just uncreated creator stuff. And I think he's playing on this equivocation throughout the debate. I think he's taking a word that has this looser meaning. He's defining it as really something really strict. And then he gets to say, aha, therefore you've agreed that they're not gods by nature. Like if we're using Godlogic's definition, they're not gods by nature. If we're using a more colloquial like sense of like how an ancient, like Israelite would have thought about these things, or just an ancient Near Easterner in general, they would say these things are God by nature. Like they have the nature of the gods. Like that, I don't see why we would think any otherwise. And if you ask me why would I say that, I'm going to say, well, it doesn't explicitly say that they don't or do have the nature, but what I'm going to say is the depiction given of them in the Old Testament is one which fits the God profile. But Godlogic likes to put burdens of proof on other people to prove that they have the nature, but he apparently it's okay for him to assume by default they don't. And again, he uses that ad hoc definition. So I think there's all types of tomfoolery going on Godlogic's part here.
Yeah, for you to tie the definition of what a god to that is crazy. So you're telling me that
Exactly. This is good. This is going to be important here. Abu Noori, he's finally actually about to make some headway and make some good points here.
basically the Greeks are not polytheists because they don't actually believe in real gods.
They do.
Greeks,
No, this is important. Abu Noori is right here. According to the definition of God by nature that Godlogic has defined, because he's defined as someone as God by nature if they are the uncreated creator of all, right? Like that's the kind of view he's given us. By that logic, Abu Noori is 100% correct that the Greek gods we typically think of, Zeus, Hades, Thor, or not Thor, Zeus, Hades, Aphrodite, Ares, Hermes, all of them, Noori is completely right that they are not gods by nature because in Greek mythology, they are created. They are sons of the Titans. Percy Jackson and the Olympians is like, has taught me this, right? Like,
They are polytheists. They believe that those entities are gods by nature.
you have spent this entire debate telling us that a god by nature is a being that is an uncreated creator of all. Zeus and Poseidon and all these beings, I know they were not seen as being uncreated. I know that. So you here in this very moment, you are contradicting your own standard that you have set up.
oh, you just said that there's only one nature, sir. You said there's only one divine essence.
Exactly. But according to Greek mythology, I'm not talking about you're talking about Greek mythology. In the Bible, there's only one divine essence. There's only one God by nature, one true God. In Greek mythology, they believed in multiple true gods. They believed that multiple beings were truly God.
Sir, all of
Not in the way you defined it. No. And just so everyone's clearer, the Bible never sets up a definition of God by nature. Like if you pick up your Bible and you shake it, like this definition that Godlogic's given you, it's not going to fall out. Now, don't get me wrong, the Bible is going to affirm that Yahweh alone has these properties, but that's not the question at hand. The question isn't whether Yahweh alone has these properties. The question is, what does it mean for something to be God by nature? This is terminology that he's imported into this and is used to be his battering ram. So Abu Noori, even though he has just spectacularly fell in his face throughout this debate, he is actually making a sound point here. And he is pointing out a actual hypocrite, a point of hypocrisy that Godlogic is engaging in. And unlike Godlogic, so a lot of the times where Godlogic is really, is really getting good jabs in on Abu Noori, the things that he's getting jabs in are not things that affect the debate topic, which is how many gods there are. This is an area where Abu Noori is actually making good points, and it's related to the debate topic. And this is why, even though Abu Noori does such a horrible job throughout all of this, even though they both do so horribly, and even though Godlogic refutes Abu Noori quite well on several points, the points that Godlogic refutes Noori on are not points that affect the truth of the debate, whereas the vice versa, it isn't the case. I think Noori does get Godlogic on these points that actually affect the debate topic.
these beings didn't share the same essence. You had demigods. Hold on.
I know.
You're saying that the only true God is someone who has this divine essence.
Correct.
You had gods, according to the polytheists of the past, who all had different essences, but were still gods. You still would label them polytheists.
Yes. They believed that these multiple entities were true gods. Multiple true gods.
By true gods, do you mean they shared same essence?
Meaning that they have divine essences, that there's multiple divine essences.
Oh, so as long as they were some type of divine, that was polytheism, right?
No, not some type of divine, that their essence is divine, that their essence is truly godhood. That's what they believed about their multiple entities.
So
in the Bible, in the Bible, it does not teach that these other entities are truly God, that they are truly divine in essence.
Wait, no, it denies that they are the true God, but it does not deny that they are truly gods. I feel like there's a distinction to be made here. So to go back to the analogy that we used about what's a real man, if somebody says, you're not a real man, you don't do X, Y, Z, they're not denying that person is in fact a man. They are really a man. They have this phrase like the real man, which is their prototypical depiction of what they feel like a man should be, and they're saying you don't live up to that. Like, so there is like Noori is having trouble like articulating what I think he's what he's thinking about here, but he is on the right track. Godlogic wants to say that in Greek mythology they thought there were multiple true gods, or they thought they were truly gods. Yeah, they thought they were truly gods in the sense that they were actually gods. And in the same way, by the same degree, the ancient Israelites thought there were multiple gods. They thought of those gods, of the ones who were truly actually gods, they thought Yahweh was the true God, the highest, species unique and all that. But they nonetheless thought these other beings were gods, as they explicitly refer to them numerous times as gods. So I'm really interested to hear, what is Godlogic's argument for saying the Greeks, they thought their beings had the divine essence or were truly God, or whatever. What's his reasoning for thinking that's the case with them, but not the case with the Elohim in the Old Testament? It seems like he's just changing his definition when he's talking about the Greeks and whether or not they believed in a God. It seems like, I think he's going to want to redefine what it means to be a true God. But then when he goes over to the ancient Israelites, he's going to then change what it means to be a true God. And no, this is just hypocritical. Like, we need to come up with a definition. What is a god? And then whether or not, a culture met that definition. And at the beginning of this debate, Abu Noori gave a definition of a god that, comes from a decent enough source. It was decent enough. And which fits the profile of a god that we see in the Greek system, in the Egyptian system, in the Mesopotamian system, in the Israelite system, the Norse system, so on and so forth. So yeah, Noori got Godlogic here. Godlogic's being inconsistent in his reasoning and in his standard, and he's importing things into the text. He's not just reading. Noori is making a good point here.
It doesn't teach that. It teaches that there's only one true God, as Jeremiah says, as John 17 says, as 1 Corinthians 8 says, as Galatians says. It says that these things that they worshiped and sacrificed to are not gods.
Mm-hmm.
That's going from his one little proof text in Jeremiah 2:11, which I've already addressed, and as Noori has pointed out in Deuteronomy 32. The speaker explicitly refers to them as gods. Yahweh specifically refers to them as gods.
Yeah, they can come and say that later all they want to. Here's the issue that we're having in regards to the Greek mythology. Yeah, we're gonna get into that. Here's what I have in regards to the Greek mythology.
We got 15 minutes left.
Did the Greeks believe that those gods were capable of death?
Say that again.
Did the Greeks believe their gods were capable of death?
I believe so.
Okay. Did they believe that those gods were eternal?
Not necessarily. No.
They believed as long as they weren't killed or unalived, I guess
they'll live on. Yeah.
Yeah, that they would still keep on living forever, right?
Yeah.
They believed that there was a hierarchy. There was one god that was the most high, supreme god, Thor, and the rest of them were like lesser gods. Correct?
It wouldn't be Thor if you switched from Greek
Zeus,
to
my
Norse.
Bad. Yeah, Zeus. My bad.
Yeah. They believed Zeus was the leader of them all. Yeah.
What's the difference here, sir? Give me the.
Okay, so this is a very good question. Like in the Greek system, in the Norse system, there are multiple gods, even though they're not the uncreated creator of all, even though they could be destroyed, so on and so forth. This is a fair question.
The symmetry breaker? I'll give you the symmetry breaker. Here's the symmetry breaker. One worldview, i.e. Greek mythology, believes that multiple entities are truly gods, while there is one true God that is more powerful or the leader or head over the pantheon of other actual gods. While in the Bible, it absolutely rejects unambiguously that there are any other gods truly by God, true gods by nature.
There it is. Okay, so let's walk this back. So he says, actually, we're going to go through this a little bit at a time.
It absolutely God that is these are truly gods.
Okay, when you say this worldview affirms that there are multiple beings that are truly gods, what do you mean by the word truly gods? Because up to this point in the debate, you have used the term truly gods to mean the uncreated creator of all, or something in that ballpark. And so if you're taking the definition of truly gods that you have been using this entire debate, and you're applying that to Greek mythology, they did not believe that Zeus and Ares and all these, that they didn't believe they were true gods in that sense that you've been using. So that statement is simply false, Godlogic. According to the standard of what a true God is that you have given us consistently, multiple times throughout this debate, under that system, they did not have multiple true gods.
While there is one true God that is more powerful or the leader or head over the pantheon of other actual gods.
Okay, so now he's saying actual gods. Are actual gods and true gods being equivocated here? Is he saying that you can't be an actual God without being a true God? Because if so, what he's saying is you cannot be an actual God without being a uncreated creator of all, because that's what he's defined a true God to be. But if that's the case, then none of the Greek gods are actual gods. Like, God logic is so bad at philosophy, it makes me just like, it just is infuriating.
Well, in the Bible, it absolutely rejects unambiguously that there are any other gods truly by God, true gods by nature.
Okay, so there it is. So yeah, it rejects that there are gods that there are multiple uncreated creators of all. That's true. But what is not true is that according to the Bible, there are not multiple actual gods. And here's the thing: if we want to know, okay, in the Old Testament, if I'm an ancient Israelite, do they consider beings that are not the uncreated creator of all? Do they consider them gods? Okay, that's the question. Do they consider them gods? How are we gonna answer this question? We look at how they use the word God, God logic. If we look at how they use the word God, and we consistently see them applying the word God to beings who are not the uncreated creator of all, then we can see that, oh no, for them, to be a god doesn't just mean to be the uncreated creator of all. That's not how they use that term. Just as with the Greeks, we can say, what does it mean to be a Greek what does it mean to be a god in a Greek system? We would look at how the Greek writers use the term God. We would look at how they apply that to various entities, and we'd say, oh, they apply this term to Zeus and to Ares and Aphrodite and to Hermes and all this, even though they were created. So in this system, they must not have thought that you had to, be the uncreated creator to be a god. If we are consistent with the standard that we apply to Greeks or to the to the Old Testament, if we're consistent in our methodology of how do we decide how this culture views what a god is, we're going to come out with saying that both of these systems affirm that there were actual gods. Now, you may say that in the difference or a symmetry breaker here is that Israelite, they thought there was one species unique god. That's great, but they are still both affirming there are multiple gods. And if you try to take the definition that you have consistently given us throughout this debate and said no being is an actual God unless it's the uncreated creator of all, then by that logic, none of these other beings in Greek mythology, the Zeus, the Hermes, or whatever, none of them are the true gods. So God logic is just talking out of both sides of his mouth right now. He cannot have it both ways. And Abu Noori is 100% correct to press him on this. I think Abu Noori could have done a better job on pressing him on this, but that is he is making good points here.
Other than Yahweh, it says that Yahweh is the true God. You'll never see Greek mythology saying Zeus is the true God and denying that Hercules or Hades or any of them are gods.
Okay, but notice he said you'll never see Greek mythology saying that Zeus is the only true God and that none of these others are gods. But wait a second. What I'm going to say is the Bible does not deny that these beings are gods. The one verse you have to go to there is Jeremiah 2:11. And I've already given two responses to that. One, I've pointed out this is probably talking about physical idols. And two, I've noted that even if it's talking about spiritual beings, this is language comparable to what we see in Deuteronomy 32, where language of no people is used to refer, not to say that there's no people who exist, but to say they are comparatively worthless or weak or, insignificant or something like that. So you don't have, I'm thinking about like Hamilton here. You don't have the votes. Like if we look at the entirety of the Old Testament system here, you just simply do not have the votes from the Old Testament writers to say that they did not think there were actual gods. Like if you look at all the instances in which Elohim is used in the Old Testament in a way that seems to indicate they affirm that these beings exist, it massively outnumbers the literally like one verse that you think you have which denies that they're gods, and I've already refuted that verse. So just epic, undeniable fail on God logic's part here.
You'll never see them denying that. In the Bible, it denies Baal, it denies Molech, it denies all the idols of the nations. It denies all of them as being actual gods.
No, it doesn't. It says they're not the one true God. It does not say they're not actual gods. God logic, he is like a slippery little like snake. He's just defining his terms willy-nilly. He's not being consistent in how he defines his terms. He's not being consistent in how he uses things. He's just changing things on the fly. And he's inserting things. This is what bugs me, is he has this little phrase, we just read, but then he'll read a verse and he'll insert things into it about nature, essence, God by nature, so on and so forth.
That's the symmetry breaker.
So real fast, so 2 Kings 23, 21 and 3. So he rebuilt the high places, etc., etc. They worship Baal, Asherah, and they worship all the host of heaven. If we go to 1 Kings 22 and 19, it says, therefore said, so remember, what were the people worshiping? They were worshiping the heavenly host.
It says it includes that with them. So they worshiped Baal, made an Asherah as Ahab the king had done, and worshipped all the host of heaven and served them.
Okay. So, and Micah said, therefore, hear the words of the Lord. I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne with all of the host of heaven standing beside him, on his right and on his right and on his left. Who will entice Ahab that he may go to Ramoth Gilead, and one said a thing and another said a thing? Who's saying a thing? The heavenly host.
That's a different context.
Then a spirit came forth and stood before Yahweh, saying, I will deceive him. And Yahweh, the word here is Strong 6601. I will deceive him. And the Lord.
Y'all, I'm gonna be honest with you. If you're in a debate and you're telling me you're using Strong's concordance, that's really embarrassing. I've had this happen in a debate before. Like, ironically, Mike Heiser, I think, has some material out where he specifically talks about the problems of Strong's concordance. It is just, to put it massively, oversimplify it, it's an outdated work. If you're going to be engaged in these type of public debates, get off Blue Letter Bible, get something like Logo software, get you an actual Old Testament or a Greek or a Hebrew dictionary, get you some lexicons, get something other than Strong's. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Godlogic. I don't care if you're Abu Noori. If you're getting up and you're doing these debates, it's not that expensive. Invest in it. You're gonna be a lot more competent, and you're gonna look a lot less silly. If I'm in a dialogue with someone publicly, I think I had this happen with Metaphysics Mike when I debated him on the deity of Jesus in the New Testament. I think I remember that him happening with that, and I was just like, my dude, I just can't take this seriously right now.
Said to him by what means? He said, I will go and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, you are to deceive him, and you will succeed. Go out and do so. Now, therefore, behold, Yahweh has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets. The Lord has declared disaster amongst you. Why is this heavenly host standing to the right and the left of your God?
Okay, and then Abu Noori goes right back to being incompetent. Abu Noori, no matter how Godlogic answers this, it's not the debate topic. Because nothing about how he answers this is going to answer the question about how many gods there are in the Bible. How are you both so bad at this?
Because he's addressing them. So what? Where do you get this? Is my thing, because even you reading it proved that they're not gods by nature but created spirits. Where in the verse do you get?
I just want to clarify again, because he keeps going to the God by nature bell. That phrase, by nature gods or gods by nature, the only verse he's presented that's used that type of language in the Bible is Galatians, and he misrepresented it. He failed to understand. It was saying physical objects in the sky that people thought were gods. He's saying those are by nature not gods. Why? Well, because one, they're physical objects. They're not in the spiritual realm. They're not these persons. They're not these spiritual beings who have authority. Like, they're none of that, right? They do not fit the, ancient Near Eastern God profile. And so this phrase he goes back to again and again, it all comes from one verse, which he misinterpreted.
That the heavenly hosts here in this context are actual gods by nature. Where do you get this from?
This is the same heavenly host, according to Michael Heiser and a majority of scholarship. The majority opinion is that the heavenly host and the divine council are one. These words are interchangeable. The heavenly host is the divine council.
In certain contexts. Again, but Michael Heiser and the majority of scholarship agree that the heavenly hosts are not gods by nature.
I know I'm repeating himself. If he means they agree that they are not gods by nature in the sense that they're not the uncreated creator, yeah. But Michael Heisel will explicitly tell you that these are gods. These are not just made up imaginations. These are bona fide divine beings, Godlogic. And if you don't understand that, stop quoting Mike Heiser. Go work through his material. I've looked at a lot of Heiser stuff when writing my books. You simply do not understand the man you're trying to represent here.
Again, I'll read Michael Heiser again. there was a good deal of theological diversity, including polytheism, living among Israel, living hither or and yon in the deserts, hill country, etc., but not with respect to the biblical writers. The biblical writers, according to Michael Heiser, were not polytheists. They were monotheists.
No, my God. I know I've already addressed this. I've already addressed that specific quote. So I'm not going to go into it at length again. I've already read stuff about that. No, Heiser specifically says these terms like monotheism are not adequate to describe the Israelite religion. And when Heiser is denying they're polytheistic, he is explicitly clear that he is denying not just that they believe there were multiple divine beings, because he explicitly says he thinks there are multiple divine beings. Like, he specifically uses the language of divine plurality. Rather, he is denying a certain set of beliefs, which he defines and he outlines in his in the quote I read from him earlier. So Godlogic is just, he is incompetent in this debate. I'm sorry, like, I know this comes off harsh. I think Godlogic's a smart guy. I think he does good stuff for the kingdom. I think he's a lot of times a pretty funny chap, but he is so emphatically wrong about this. He is so misrepresenting the scholarship he's trying to draw on this. And he does it while being so arrogant. And we haven't even gotten to the most arrogant part of this whole thing yet.
The issue that you're having here, sir, is that these polytheistic beliefs are finding their way into your Bible. Your God is sitting here with his
Where?
pantheon, right here in front of you.
Show me.
The heavenly host standing to the right and left of your God. Your only pitiful excuse is to use philosophy and say, oh, they don't share the same divine nature as God. But I just showed you that the Dead Sea Scrolls calls them what? The living gods, the holy of holy gods, the eternal gods. These are attributes that are attributed to Yahweh's nature, sir.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Let me respond to this. Again.
I'm not finished, bro. Let me land
But
my plane.
you're laying on a different point.
I'm landing here, bro.
Okay, like, don't shotgun too many points, man.
Yeah, so the point being that, your God Yahweh is given these same attributes in regards to nature or essence as the gods plural, sir. How is that not? How do they have a different divine essence? Go ahead.
In the passage that you quoted from the Dead Sea Scroll, who is it referring to when it refers to gods and holy ones and yada yada?
It's referring to the God. The whole passage is referring to the multiple gods. They're called the gods of knowledge.
Can you show us that, please?
But I have it here. I just want to put it on the screen for you. Give me 1 second.
Can I put something on the screen for you?
I'm sure if you want to. Unless
Okay.
you want to type in my source and put it on the screen for me.
I don't know. Unless you could, how about email me? Email me your source, and I can probably do that. You still got my email, but really quick, can you look at this really quick? This is Galatians chapter 4, verse 8. Okay, it says, "But at that time, indeed, not knowing God, you were enslaved to those by nature, physei, not being gods."
Mm-hmm.
You asked me to show you this. I quoted this to you in my opening statement. You asked me to show you where in the Bible does it mention being gods by nature. Right here, it literally shows you that before they came to the knowledge of the true God, they were enslaved to those who by nature were not gods.
Right.
Those being referring to the physical objects, the celestial objects, their movements, whatnot like that. Again, going by Heiser, who is someone apparently both of you want to appeal to in this.
So once again, these later theological attempts to clean up what's clearly in your Bible. I'll just wait for you to finish, man.
Bro, it's over, man. It's really
Hey, look,
it's really done,
these later attempts to clean up what's in your Bible, it's not going to help you, because once again, we see your God in the Bible in a pantheon with other beings such as the heavenly hosts who have these explicit, because once again, you're trying to take and go with this definition of a God is something with the holy nature. And the cowardly thing about this is, when we first agreed to this debate on Mamas and Cousins panel, I made it clear to you that this debate was not going to be about some arbitrary Christian definition of God by nature. We've got that recorded. That'll be out there.
Okay, I want to talk about this. This is really significant. When I heard that, I took note. Because if it's the case that Godlogic agreed to not use as like a specifically Christian definition of God if he agreed to use a general definition of God that, is like a colloquial sense, then Godlogic has emphatically lost this debate. Like, it's not just a maybe, it's not just a by the like skin of his teeth, because Nori does so bad. Like, there's a part of me that wants to be like, they both lost, no one won. But if Nori is telling the truth here, and Godlogic did agree to not use a specific Christian definition of God, Godlogic has emphatically, undeniably lost. If Nori is right about this, if Godlogic agreed to debate this and use just a general definition, like there are multiple gods in the Bible, Abu Noori has shown that. Because when Godlogic says, "Oh, but none of these gods are gods by nature," he's saying none of these gods fit a specific definition that Godlogic has concocted to weed out one thing or another. By any general, if you're an anthropologist and you say, "What is a god in the ancient Near East? What is a god in general with human history?" It is going to be the type of being that we saw Abu Noori describe in the beginning, and that he gave a definition from. And like I said, I reached out to both of these guys, and I couldn't get, I didn't get an answer back. No, maybe you could say, James, you didn't wait enough time. I mean, it's been about, I sent it yesterday. I saw Godlogic on TikTok doing live streams. I hopped into his live streams and, hey, like, can you like respond to my message? At this point, I'm going to assume that he saw it and he didn't want to respond. I don't know about Abu Noori. I don't know if he'll ever respond to me. I'm not going to wait on putting this video out. And definitely I'll put a link, or I'll put a pinned comment if they ever get back to me and clarity on this. But if Abu Noori is right about this, like Godlogic just lost. And it's not just that he lost, it's that he is deceptive and he owes Abu Noori an apology. If Godlogic really agreed to do this debate in the way under the definition that Noori described, Godlogic owes him an apology because he was just deceptive and dishonest in doing this. And we have to hold him accountable for that.
Because we're going to go by the definition of what it says. God is these spiritual beings, the definition that I read to you in the beginning of the issue with, I hope you guys can still hear me. The issue with that is you've now conceded the argument. You've conceded the debate by doing
I conceded? What world are you living in, dude?
Allow me to finish, sir. Allow me to finish. The reason that you conceded is because when we agreed to this debate on my Muslim Cousin's platform, we agreed that I would not use an Islamic definition of God, nor would you use the Christian definition of what you conceive to be God, which is this divine essence goofiness. And that we would use, we did agree.
Never happened.
No problem. It never happened.
Now,
what world are you living in?
Okay, you spoke for a long time. Now, ladies and gentlemen, look at where we're at, guys. Now we're at the point in the debate.
Okay, so Abu Noori says this was agreed upon. Godlogic says it didn't happen. At this point, the thing to clear this up for me would be a recording. These guys are welcome to reach out to me with a recording or with screenshots or whatever. Even if Godlogic didn't agree to that beforehand, I'm still gonna say he definitely didn't win, and I'm probably gonna say he lost this. But if that is there, then I'm gonna say this is probably a definitive, like just a definitive loss for Godlogic on this.
Where he's now crying about the prompt, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, God. Now that we've completely obliterated. Let me give you guys a rundown on why this is so special for Abu Noori and why he's so sensitive for this. Abu Noori, this was his best argument against Christianity. It was his best argument. And so Abu Noori was running this on TikTok and dared to challenge me on this topic. I say, yeah, we could go ahead and do this. And so now that this has been utterly destroyed, utterly annihilated, intellectually, like it's been demolished. Now all of a sudden, now he's complaining about how we're defining God and how I'm proving the point. And you conceded. You asked me to show you something. I showed it.
I want to point out here so that if somebody deviates from the agreed upon topic and format and definitions of a debate, it's completely valid in that debate to call them out on it. I will say that if Abu Noori is correct about this, which I don't know for sure either way, he should have brought this up earlier in the debate. Like, I think that was a mistake. Like, as soon as Godlogic started saying this, oh, well, they're not God by nature. They're not the true God. Like, he started having these like specific Christianized definitions of what a God is. That's when Noori should have been like, you agreed to use a non-Christian definition of what a God is, and now you're deviating from that. So I don't know whether or not, I don't know what Noori is referring to. I've tried to find it. If anyone knows what they're referring to, please let me know, and then also check the comments to see if I have a pinned comment clarifying this after I post it. But this is something Noiri should have brought up prior to this point, and that is suspicious. I'm not saying he's wrong, because I think there's other things that about Noori's presentation that makes me think maybe like they seem to make it probable that Godlogic agreed to something like this. But the fact that he didn't bring it up, if it's not suspicious, if it's not that, it was at least strategically very foolish for him not to bring this up before this point.
To you, it's over. According to the Bible, there's there's God by nature, and then there's the other spiritual beings that also exist, that work for Yahweh, that he allotted territory. It's over. They're not.
And those spiritual beings are called Elohim, which is the Hebrew word for God. They're called Theos, which is the Greek word for God. And the phrase about not being gods by nature was probably in reference to physical objects in the night sky. So he didn't destroy anything, Godlogic.
Actual gods.
You finish?
Absolutely, man. You're finished.
The reason why this is so pathetic is because you have to lean to this philosophical definition of God that's never been understood.
It's Bible.
History.
It's in the Bible.
What else?
There is nowhere in the Bible where it says a being is God by nature if this being is XYZ. Like this phrase, this definition that Godlogic's using, it doesn't offer that. It describes, it calls multiple beings God. It calls one of those beings God, and it says that they have these specific attributes, but it never gives this outlined definition of what a God by nature is. Godlogic's just wrong. He's misrepresenting the data.
Is in your Bible? Pagan Canaanite mythology. Exactly. What else is in your Bible? Pagan Canaanite.
So you do agree that in my Bible it does teach God by nature?
I didn't interrupt you, brother, because I'm not worried about what you're talking about. There's no need for me to interrupt.
So you agree the Bible teaches God by nature? Just real quick.
You gotta hold on and let me speak, right?
I just want to know if you agree that it does teach God by nature.
I didn't interrupt you, G. Stop coping.
Look at him, man. Belt boy.
This is what's so crazy, and here's the reason I'm crying. Because when I took the debate with you, I saw the goofiness coming. Oh, it's the divine nature. It's the divine nature. I just showed him verses where these gods are said to have the same essence. That wasn't sufficient. I showed him where his God is interacting with these gods. I haven't even brought out the verses about him punishing these gods. Because it says in Isaiah 24 and 21 that on the last day he's going to punish these gods. I guess there's these evil gods.
Okay, so I want to address, I put off addressing this up to this point, and now I'm going to address it here. Godlogic, you're a grown man, act like it. Same thing that goes for Abu Noori. Both of you act like children in this debate. Abu Noori's over here with a belt, acting like he's going to beat someone. Godlogic has this whole shtick where he's acting like he's like cooking up a pot or something. He constantly posts videos saying, oh, this person gets cooked, this person gets destroyed. Both of you are acting like schoolyard children here. Like, grow up and act like the grown men you are, right? Act like true men, right? Like, I'm going to use my own little example here. Like, this is pathetic. This is embarrassing to me for both of you. Like, anyone watching this who is a Muslim or is a Christian should be embarrassed by both of your conduct. Like, in what universe do either one of you think that this type of conduct, and here I'm seeing Godlogic do it, but don't worry, Abu Noori is about to be obnoxious as well. I'm just going to go ahead and make these comments here. In what universe does this type of conduct build a bridge where fruitful interfaith dialogue can be appreciated? Like, where in your mind do you think this is helping anything? Like, if somebody else engages in the chest thumping nonsense, because listen, a lot of Muslims do that. I mean, my gosh, Muhammad Hijab does this like all the time. Them doing it doesn't magically make it less childish when you do it as well. Like, be the bigger man here. Act like an adult. And just have the discussion. Like, don't do this childish mockery. I mean, it is embarrassing to me that you have 500,000 subscribers. You're probably, and a few other guys are like the leading apologists online right now. And this is how you act in a debate. This is embarrassing to me. Like, we need, if you're watching this and you're like an apologist who's up and coming and you're trying to here's what you need to do. Be better than these guys, because they've set the bar pretty low. He set the bar low in how to handle yourself like an adult in these situations. He's set the bar low in how to engage in consistent philosophical argumentation and how to, actually engage with the prompt. Like, the bar is set so low. And I know Godlogic's fan club are going to lose their mind when they hear me say this, because they have made him into the true Muslim apologist. They have made him into the epitome. But the reality is, a lot of the people who follow these debates, whether they're Muslims following the Muslims debates or the Christians following their own Christian debaters, they treat it like a team sport. They can't see past They can't see past the points their guy makes. They think that their guy makes the greatest points, and they can't see that the arguments in general by both of these guys have been absolute dog water. And they'll say, how could you ever, say that God Logic lost this or something along those lines.
God's sitting up in heaven alongside. Oh, I got you.
Yep, here it is. Here comes the obnoxiousness from him. Yep, we're gonna act like an
I
abusive
got you. I
dad.
got to teach you
Jeez.
one. We got these evil gods sitting up here beside your God, throwing down lightning bolts. I told
What
you to
is
stop
this?
worshiping all these pagan gods, man. Now I gotta put this belt on you.
Got talking to Mike.
The only way you can get away from it, bro, is by trying to lean on this goofy definition. They're not gods by nature. Bro, what the hell is a deity that your most high God calls a god, gives a nation to be a god over, sits in a council with your God? We even have Shemosh getting into it with your God, but they're not gods because we say they're not gods because we wrote in the book they're not gods by nature. You still haven't told us. Why is your book quoting the polytheistic Canaanite text, sir? Why is your book quoting a polytheistic source?
All right,
We're still waiting for that answer.
my turn to
Go
respond
ahead.
now, okay?
Yeah,
Because
go ahead.
I already destroyed all of that, and you couldn't even engage with what I said.
Can you
in
answer
relation-
why there's
in relation-
polytheism?
Just really quick,
Polytheistic
I
texts in the Bible.
already dealt with that. So you do agree that according to the Bible, it does have a concept of God by nature, right?
I agree that the Bible is contradictory.
So since Abu Noori is not going to engage on this, I'm going to be the competent interlocutor that God Logic doesn't have. The only instance, so when you say the Bible has this concept of God by nature, when you say that, you're appealing to Galatians. That's the phrase you're getting this from. And that section where it's God by nature, it doesn't offer any definition of what does it mean to be a God by nature. So it picks out a particular thing, and I'm going to say the thing it's picking out, I'm going to draw from Michael Heiser, the scholar you draw on, and I'm going to say this thing it's picking out, it's saying those things are not God by nature. And the thing it's denying God by nature to is not the spirits that are called gods, it is the specific physical objects that are mistakenly taken to be gods, right? So I'm going to say right there, one, that's a problem. So like your whole they're not gods by nature thing, that's not even up to running. But then I'm going to go a step further and say this thing that they're saying they're not gods by nature, it never tells us why they're not gods by nature. So if we think of God by nature, there's a set of properties that have to be exemplified. It doesn't tell us what those properties that need to be exemplified in order to be God by nature. That passage doesn't tell us that. And so you just fail. Like I know this is redundant. Like this just isn't the W you think it is. If we're going to ask what is the nature of a god in the ancient world, then we're going to look at how the term is used. We're going to construct a God profile, and we're going to say, okay, there are multiple beings who fit that God profile. And if you say, are they gods by nature? I'm going to say, well, they have the nature of the God in the sense they fit this God profile that we created. So this just this whole God Logic's whole system, his whole way of dealing with Abu Noori in this, is all based on two things: a misrepresentation of Galatians and him reading something into the text that's not there.
I didn't ask that. I'll ask
That's the
again.
answer. That's
Do
the
you
answer.
do you agree? And like, just be honest with me, man. It's like it's not gonna hurt you.
Okay.
Do you agree that there is a concept in the Bible of God by nature?
In the New Testament, you just showed
In
us
the
a
Bible.
verse.
In
In
the
the New
Bible.
Testament, you just showed us.
Is the
this
New
verse.
Testament part of the Bible?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so is that a yes? According to the Bible, it does have a concept of God by nature.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the reason why I needed this concession
Just
from
real
you,
fast, just very quick. Does it also have other than that in the Bible?
it has
No, that's not the question. The question is, okay, yeah, let's say the New Testament has the concept of God by nature, but what is a God by nature? That's the question you need to be asking. You can say the New Testament has the concept of a God by nature. Okay, there are some things, whatever they are, that aren't God by nature, but what does it mean to be God by nature? The New Testament doesn't spell that out. The New Testament does spell out that we are going to be partakers of the divine nature, so have fun with that. But it doesn't, you can't just say, oh, they have the concept of God by nature, therefore I win. You have to show that your definition of that term is in Scripture.
it has other concepts of the term God, but not by nature.
Okay, so there are
So,
gods.
hold on,
that
let me
exist-
finish what I was
hold
about to
on. So
say.
there are gods that
Let me
exist
finish what I was
outside of
about to
that,
say.
right?
Let me finish what I was about to say. Okay. The reason why it was important for you to admit this, that the Bible does have a concept of God by nature, is because you started off in your opening statement. You started off saying, I'm not talking about gods by like judges. I'm not talking about just gods who have rulership or whatever. I'm talking about gods who have power, gods who have sovereignty, gods who exhort their wrath. You were talking about gods by nature, actually being gods.
Whoa, wait a second. Now you've changed your definition of what a god by nature is. So before you told us that a god by nature is a being that is the uncreated creator of all. That's what you told us what a god by nature is. Now you've changed the definition of what a god by nature was. Now you're telling me a god by nature is a being that has power, authority, exerts wrath, has sovereignty. That hasn't been defined. I don't know what that's. I don't know the specifics of what you're using there. Are you saying sovereignty over all? Are you saying sovereignty over a certain area? Because the gods of the nations, they were given authority, so they were sovereign in some sense. Like we might say a king is sovereign over his nation. The gods in the Old Testament, they did have authority. That's pretty clear. So they were sovereign in some sense. They're not sovereign in the sense that we typically attribute to Yahweh. But the point I want to make here is now Godlogic has changed the definition of what a god by nature is that he's been using through the entire debate.
Being actual divine beings. And so with your concession that the Bible does have a concept of God by nature, and it explicitly excludes everything else other than Yahweh from being God by nature.
It doesn't, though. I've already talked about this. It doesn't.
Your argument is done. The debate is over. It was over a long time ago, but it's like over again, and now it's over again. It's over again. It's over, bro. I don't even know what we're doing here anymore. How much time we got left, Life?
I agree with Godlogic. What are we even doing here? We'll call it there. I don't know if there's anything else. We're gonna go ahead and pull me center screen. So I guess to put it maybe simply, I think Godlogic lost, and I'm tempted to say Abu Noori won, because Abu Noori presented passages which affirm that the Bible contains multiple gods. And Godlogic wasn't able to respond to those without redefining what a god was in a way that's inconsistent and moving the goalposts. And it was just really violating. It wasn't that he even redefined what a god was. He qualified it to be a specific type of god. And so that's how he dealt with Abu Noori's verses. He said, oh, well, this is just not a specific type of God. And to do that, and in his way of doing that, was to take a verse, misinterpret it, insert a definition into it, which even if his interpretation was correct, he inserts into it a definition of what the nature of a God is, which isn't there in the text. And then he uses that as, he plugs that into these other ones. And so, yeah, I mean, as poorly as I think both of them did, I'm tempted to say generally I'm tempted to say Godlogic didn't win, Noori didn't win. The only people who won are the people who didn't watch this train wreck. Generally, I'm tempted to say something like that. I'm tempted to say maybe Noori won, very reluctantly. It's just so awful. Anyways, so if you're interested in this debate and things regarding this is stuff that I researched and I talk about when writing my book, The Devil's Disbarment, Exploring Christ's Victory in the Divine Council. I have the first chapter talking about the reality of other gods and passages which affirm that, and so on and so forth, and I draw from Heiser's work. And I think that all that is needed to understand what it is that Jesus does for us. Then I wrote this book recently, which is free. Actually, this is free on Amazon. It's The Lord Appeared, Jesus as Yahweh in the Old Testament. I go through and I make a case that the Bible affirms the deity of Christ. I think this is probably the best resource on the market right now for if you're a layperson and you're like, I need to argue for the deity of Christ. I think this is probably the best one-stop shop for that. I know that's a big claim and I wrote it, so I'm biased, but it's free. Check it out. And then this is not as related to the stuff we talked about today, but I have my book, What Jesus Didn't Know. This is a slightly modified copy of my dissertation. This is also available for free. I'll have the links to that in the description. I doubt that Godlogic or Noori will watch all the way through this debate. So if they did, hey guys, I was harsh on you. Nothing personal. Debates get weird. Debates get heated. But both of you need to do better. Not just in your research, but in your conduct with one another. Leave the childish stuff at home. And also, I'm going to say this here. If you're going to do a response to this video, at least bother to engage with what I actually said. Because in the past, when I critiqued Godlogic, one of his fanboys tried to critique me, and within 4 minutes, that guy showed that he wasn't interested in representing me accurately. So if you do plan to make a response video to this response video, first off, good luck. This thing is super long. But second off, at least bother to engage with what I'm saying.